Atomic Habits by James Clear. Chapter 1. The Surprising Power of Atomic Habits. The fate of British cycling changed dramatically one day in 2003. For nearly a century, the organization had endured a state of mediocrity, winning only a single gold medal at the Olympic Games and failing to win the Tour de France even once in over 100 years. The performance of the team had been so underwhelming that one top bike manufacturer famously refused to sell them equipment, fearing it would hurt their brand's reputation to be associated with such lack of success. This trajectory shifted when the organization hired Dave Brailsford as its new performance director. Brailsford differed from previous coaches because of his relentless commitment to a strategy he called the aggregation of marginal gains. The philosophy was simple. Search for a tiny margin of improvement in everything you do. The belief was that if you broke down everything that goes into riding a bike and improved it by just 1%, you would get a significant increase when you put them all together. The team began by making small adjustments that one might expect, such as redesigning bike seats for comfort and rubbing alcohol on tires for better grip. But they did not stop there. They continued to find 1% improvements in overlooked and unexpected areas. They tested different massage gels to see which led to the fastest muscle recovery. They hired a surgeon to teach each rider the best way to wash their hands to reduce the chances of catching a cold. They determined the type of pillow and mattress that led to the best night's sleep for each rider. They even painted the inside of the team truck white, which helped them spot little bits of dust that would normally slip by unnoticed but could degrade the performance of the finely tuned bikes. As these and hundreds of other small improvements accumulated, the results came faster than anyone could have imagined. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team dominated the road and track cycling events at the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, where they won an astounding 60% of the gold medals available. 4 years later, when the Olympics came to London, the Brits raised the bar as they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. That same year, Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. The next year, his teammate Chris Froome won the race, and he would go on to win again in subsequent years, giving the British team 5 Tour de France victories in 6 years. It is easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment and underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis. Too often, we convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action. Whether it is losing weight, building a business, writing a book, winning a championship, or achieving any other goal, we put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everyone will talk about. Meanwhile, improving by 1% isn't particularly notable. Sometimes it isn't even noticeable. But it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. The difference a tiny improvement can make over time is astounding. If you can get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you'll decline nearly down to 0. What starts as a small win or a minor setback accumulates into something much more. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. The same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them. They seem to make little difference on any given day, and yet the impact they deliver over the months and years can be enormous. It is only when looking back 2, 5, or perhaps 10 years later that the value of good habits and the cost of bad ones becomes strikingly apparent. This can be a difficult concept to appreciate in daily life. We often dismiss small changes because they don't seem to matter very much in the moment. If you save a little money now, you're still not a millionaire. If you go to the gym 3 days in a row, you're still out of shape. If you study Mandarin for an hour tonight, you still haven't learned the language. We make a few changes, but the results never seem to come quickly, and so we slide back into our previous routines. Unfortunately, the slow pace of transformation also makes it easy to let a bad habit slide. If you eat an unhealthy meal today, the scale doesn't move much. If you work late tonight and ignore your family, they will forgive you. A single decision is easy to dismiss. But when we repeat small errors day after day, by replicating poor decisions, duplicating tiny mistakes, and rationalizing little excuses, our small choices compound into toxic results. The impact created by a change in your habits is similar to the effect of shifting the route of an airplane by just a few degrees. Imagine you are flying from Los Angeles to New York City. If a pilot leaving from Los Angeles adjusts the heading just 3.5 degrees south, you will land in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. Such a small change is barely noticeable at takeoff. The nose of the airplane moves just a few feet, but when magnified across the entire United States, you end up hundreds of miles apart. Similarly, a slight change in your daily habits can guide your life to a very different destination. Making a choice that is 1% better or 1% worse seems insignificant in the moment, but over the span of moments that make up a lifetime, these choices determine the difference between who you are and who you could be. Success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations. Your outcomes are a lagging measure of your habits. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. Your clutter is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. You get what you repeat. If you want to predict where you'll end up in life, all you have to do is follow the curve of tiny gains or tiny losses and see how your daily choices will compound 10 or 20 years down the line. Time magnifies the margin between success and failure. It will multiply whatever you feed it. Good habits make time your ally. Bad habits make time your enemy. To understand why progress is not linear, imagine that you have an ice cube sitting on the table in front of you. The room is cold and you can see your breath. It is currently 25 degrees. Ever so slowly, the room begins to heat up. 26 degrees, 27, 28. The ice cube is still sitting on the table in front of you. 29 degrees, 30, 31. Still, nothing has happened. Then 32 degrees. The ice begins to melt. A 1-degree shift, seemingly no different from the temperature increases before it, has unlocked a huge change. Breakthrough moments are often the result of many previous actions which build up the potential required to unleash a major change. This pattern shows up everywhere. Cancer spends 80% of its life undetectable, then takes over the body in months. Bamboo can barely be seen for the first 5 years as it builds extensive root systems underground before exploding 90 feet into the air within 6 weeks. Similarly, habits often appear to make no difference until you cross a critical threshold and unlock a new level of performance. In the early and middle stages of any quest, there is often a valley of disappointment. You expect to make progress in a linear fashion, and it's frustrating how ineffective changes can seem during the first days, weeks, and even months. It doesn't feel like you are going anywhere. It's a hallmark of any compounding process. The most powerful outcomes are delayed. This is one of the core reasons why it is so hard to build habits that last. People make a few small changes, fail to see a tangible result, and decide to stop. You think, I've been running every day for a month, so why can't I see any change in my body? Once this kind of thinking takes over, it's easy to let good habits fall by the wayside. But in order to make a meaningful difference, habits need to persist long enough to break through this plateau. What is best described as the plateau of latent potential. If you find yourself struggling to build a good habit or break a bad one, it is not because you have lost your ability to improve. It is often because you have not yet crossed the plateau of latent potential. Complaining about not achieving success despite working hard is like complaining about an ice cube not melting when you heated it from 25 to 31 degrees. Your work was not wasted. It is just being stored. All the action happens at 32 degrees. Prevailing wisdom claims that the best way to achieve what we want in life, getting into better shape, building a successful business, relaxing more and worrying less, spending more time with friends and family, is to set specific, actionable goals. However, results have very little to do with the goals we set and nearly everything to do with the systems we follow. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you're a coach, your goal might be to win a championship. Your system is the way you recruit players, manage your assistant coaches, and conduct practice. If you're an entrepreneur, your goal might be to build $1 million business. Your system is how you test product ideas, hire employees, and run marketing campaigns. If you completely ignored your goals and focused only on your system, would you still succeed? For example, if you were a basketball coach and you ignored your goal to win a championship and focused only on what your team does at practice each day, would you still get results? The answer is yes. The goal in any sport is to finish with the best score. But it would be ridiculous to spend the whole game staring at the scoreboard. The only way to actually win is to get better each day. The score takes care of itself. The same is true for other areas of life. If you want better results, then forget about setting goals. Focus on your system instead. There are 4 specific problems that arise when you spend too much time thinking about your goals and not enough time designing your systems. First, winners and losers have the same goals. Goal setting suffers from a serious case of survivorship bias. We concentrate on the people who end up winning, the survivors, and mistakenly assume that ambitious goals led to their success while overlooking all of the people who had the same objective but didn't succeed. Every Olympian wants to win a gold medal. Every candidate wants to get the job. And if successful and unsuccessful people share the same goals, then the goal cannot be what differentiates the winners from the losers. Second, achieving a goal is only a momentary change. Imagine you have a messy room and you set a goal to clean it. If you summon the energy to tidy up, then you will have a clean room, for now. But if you maintain the same sloppy habits that led to a messy room in the first place, soon you'll be looking at a new pile of clutter and hoping for another burst of motivation. You're left chasing the same outcome because you never changed the system behind it. You treated a symptom without addressing the cause. Achieving a goal only changes your life for the moment. That's the counterintuitive thing about improvement. We think we need to change our results, but the results are not the problem. What we really need to change are the systems that cause those results. Third, goals restrict your happiness. The implicit assumption behind any goal is this: once I reach my goal, then I'll be happy. The problem with a goals-first mentality is that you're continually putting happiness off until the next milestone. Furthermore, goals create an either-or conflict. Either you achieve your goal and are successful, or you fail and you are a disappointment. You mentally box yourself into a narrow version of happiness. It makes no sense to restrict your satisfaction to one scenario when there are many paths to success. A systems-first mentality provides the antidote. When you fall in love with the process rather than the product, you don't have to wait to give yourself permission to be happy. You can be satisfied anytime your system is running. Fourth, goals are at odds with long-term progress. Finally, a goal-oriented mindset can create a yo-yo effect. Many runners work hard for months, but as soon as they cross the finish line, they stop training. The race is no longer there to motivate them. When all of your hard work is focused on a particular goal, what is left to push you forward after you achieve it? This is why many people find themselves reverting to their old habits after accomplishing a goal. The purpose of setting goals is to win the game. The purpose of building systems is to continue playing the game. True long-term thinking is goalless thinking. It's not about any single accomplishment. It is about the cycle of endless refinement and continuous improvement. Ultimately, it is your commitment to the process that will determine your progress. If you're having trouble changing your habits, the problem isn't you. The problem is your system. Bad habits repeat themselves again and again, not because you don't want to change, but because you have the wrong system for change. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. This is one of the deeper meanings behind the word atomic. By now, you've probably realized that an atomic habit refers to a tiny change, a marginal gain, a 1% improvement. But atomic habits are not just any old habits, however small. They are little habits that are part of a larger system. Just as atoms are the building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are the building blocks of remarkable results. Habits are like the atoms of our lives. Each one is a fundamental unit that contributes to your overall improvement. At first, these tiny routines seem insignificant, but soon they build on each other and fuel bigger wins that multiply to a degree that far outweighs the cost of their initial investment. They are both small and mighty. This is the meaning of the phrase atomic habits, a regular practice or routine that is not only small and easy to do, but also the source of incredible power, a component of the system of compound growth. Chapter 2. How your habits shape your identity, and vice versa. It is a common frustration to see good habits fade away after a few days while bad habits stick around for years. This struggle often stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of how change actually occurs. Most attempts at self-improvement fail because we focus on the wrong things. To understand this, imagine behavior change as 3 concentric circles, like layers of an onion. The outermost layer is concerned with outcomes. This is the surface level of change, where we focus on tangible results such as losing weight, publishing a book, or winning a championship. Most goals are set at this level. The middle layer involves processes. This deeper level is about changing your habits and systems, like implementing a new workout routine or developing a daily meditation practice. The innermost core is identity. This layer is about changing your beliefs, your worldview, and your judgments about yourself and others. The majority of people approach change from the outside in. They start with the outcome they want to achieve and then try to design a process to get there. They focus on what they want to have rather than who they want to be. This leads to outcome-based habits. A more sustainable alternative is to build identity-based habits, where the focus is on who you wish to become. Consider the difference in mindset between two individuals refusing a cigarette. When offered a smoke, the first person declines by explaining they are trying to quit. While this sounds reasonable, it implies that they still view themselves as a smoker who is attempting to be something else. They are hoping their behavior will change while their underlying beliefs remain the same. The second person declines by simply stating they are not a smoker. This small shift in language signals a massive shift in identity. Smoking is part of their past, not their current reality. They no longer identify with the habit. True behavior change is identity change. You might start a habit because of motivation, but the only reason you will stick with it is that it becomes part of who you are. Anyone can convince themselves to go to the gym or eat a salad once or twice, but if the belief behind the behavior does not shift, the long-term change will be impossible to sustain. If you never change the underlying beliefs that led to your past behavior, you will always be fighting against yourself. You have a new goal and a new plan, but you haven't changed who you are. This concept explains why so many forms of self-improvement are temporary. You may want more money, but if your identity is that of a consumer rather than a creator, you will continue to be pulled towards spending. You may want better health, but if you prioritize comfort over accomplishment, you will always drift back to relaxing rather than training. Behavior that is incongruent with the self will not last. Your identity is not a fixed quality that you are born with. It is something that is learned and conditioned through experience. In fact, the word identity comes from the Latin terms for being and repeatedly. Your identity is literally your repeated beingness. You do not believe you are a particular type of person because of a single instance, but because of accumulated proof. If you go to church every week for 20 years, you have evidence that you are religious. If you study biology for an hour every night, you have evidence that you are studious. The more evidence you have for a belief, the more strongly you will believe it. This is where the power of habits truly lies. Your habits are how you embody your identity. When you make your bed each morning, you are embodying the identity of an organized person. When you write every day, you are embodying the identity of a creative person. When you train, you are embodying the identity of an athlete. Each experience casts a vote for the type of person you want to become. No single vote will win the election, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. Meaningful change does not require radical overnight transformation. It requires a gradual accumulation of small wins. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. You don't need a unanimous vote to win an election, you just need a majority. It doesn't matter if you cast a few votes for a bad habit or an unproductive behavior. The goal is simply to win the majority of the time. The most practical way to change who you are is to change what you do. This is a simple two-step process. First, decide the type of person you want to be. Second, prove it to yourself with small wins. This requires asking yourself deeper questions. Instead of asking what result you want, ask who is the type of person that could get the outcome you want. Who is the type of person that could lose 40 pounds? Who is the type of person that could run a successful startup? Who is the type of person that could write a book? Once you have an answer, for example, that a writer is someone who is consistent and reliable, your focus shifts from writing a book to being the type of person who is consistent and reliable. You begin to act like that person. You ask yourself, what would a healthy person do? Or what would a wealthy person do? And let that guide your actions. Ultimately, your habits matter because they help you become the type of person you wish to be. They are the channel through which you develop your deepest beliefs about yourself. Quite literally, you become your habits. The real reason habits matter is not just because they can get you better results, but because they can change your beliefs about yourself. They allow you to trust yourself and prove that you can actually be the person you claim to be. Chapter 3. How to Build Better Habits in 4 Simple Steps. In 1898, Edward Thorndike, a psychologist, conducted an experiment that laid the groundwork for our understanding of habit formation and the rules governing our behavior. Thorndike was interested in studying animal behavior, and he began by working with cats. He would place each cat inside a device known as a puzzle box. The box was designed so that the cat could escape through a door by performing a simple act, such as pulling at a loop of cord, pressing a lever, or stepping on a platform. For example, one box contained a lever that, when pressed, would open a door on the side of the box. Once the door had been opened, the cat could dart out and run over to a bowl of food. Most cats wanted to escape as soon as they were placed inside the box. They would poke their noses into the corners, stick their paws through openings, and claw at loose objects. After a few minutes of exploration, the cats would happen to press the magical lever. The door would open and they would escape. Thorndike tracked the behavior of each cat across many trials. In the beginning, the animals moved around the box at random, but as soon as the lever had been pressed and the door opened, the process of learning began. Gradually, each cat learned to associate the action of pressing the lever with the reward of escaping the box and getting to the food. After 20 to 30 trials, this behavior became so automatic and habitual that the cat could escape within a few seconds. For example, Thorndike noted, Cat 12 took the following times to perform the act: 160 seconds, 30 seconds, 90 seconds, 60, 15, 28, 20, 30, 22, 11, 15, 20, 12, 10, 14, 10, 8, 8, 5, 10, 8, 6, 6, 7. During the first 3 trials, the cat escaped in an average of 1.5 minutes. During the last 3 trials, it escaped in an average of 6.3 seconds. With practice, each cat made fewer errors, and their actions became quicker and more automatic. Rather than repeating the same mistakes, the cat began to cut straight to the solution. From his studies, Thorndike described the learning process by stating, "Behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated, and those that produce unpleasant consequences are less likely to be repeated." His work provides the perfect starting point for discussing how habits form in our own lives. It also provides answers to some fundamental questions like, what are habits? And why does the brain bother building them at all? A habit is a behavior that has been repeated enough times to become automatic. The process of habit formation begins with trial and error. Whenever you encounter a new situation in life, your brain has to make a decision. How do I respond to this? The first time you come across a problem, you're not sure how to solve it. Like Thorndike's cat, you're just trying things out to see what works. Neurological activity in the brain is high during this period. You are carefully analyzing the situation and making conscious decisions about how to act. You're taking in tons of new information and trying to make sense of it all. The brain is busy learning the most effective course of action. Occasionally, like a cat pressing on a lever, you stumble across a solution. You're feeling anxious, and you discover that going for a run calms you down. You're mentally exhausted from a long day of work, and you learn that playing video games relaxes you. You're exploring, and then, bam, a reward. After you stumble upon an unexpected reward, you alter your strategy for next time. Your brain immediately begins to catalog the events that preceded the reward. Wait a minute, that felt good. What did I do right before that? This is the feedback loop behind all human behavior. Try, fail, learn, try differently. With practice, the useless movements fade away and the useful actions get reinforced. That's a habit forming. Whenever you face a problem repeatedly, your brain begins to automate the process of solving it. Your habits are just a series of automatic solutions that solve the problems and stresses you face regularly. As behavioral scientist Jason Hreha writes, habits are simply reliable solutions to recurring problems in our environment. As habits are created, the level of activity in the brain decreases. You learn to lock in on the cues that predict success and tune out everything else. When a similar situation arises in the future, you know exactly what to look for. There is no longer a need to analyze every angle of a situation. Your brain skips the process of trial and error and creates a mental rule, if this, then that. These cognitive scripts can be followed automatically whenever the situation is appropriate. Now, whenever you feel stressed, you get the itch to run. As soon as you walk in the door from work, you grab the video game controller. A choice that once required effort is now automatic. A habit has been created. Habits are mental shortcuts learned from experience. In a sense, a habit is just a memory of the steps you previously followed to solve a problem in the past. Whenever the conditions are right, you can draw on this memory and automatically apply the same solution. The primary reason the brain remembers the past is to better predict what will work in the future. Habit formation is incredibly useful because the conscious mind is the bottleneck of the brain. It can only pay attention to one problem at a time. As a result, your brain is always working to preserve your conscious attention for whatever task is most essential. Whenever possible, the conscious mind likes to pawn off tasks to the non-conscious mind to do automatically. This is precisely what happens when a habit is formed. Habits reduce cognitive load and free up mental capacity so you can allocate your attention to other tasks. Despite their efficiency, some people still wonder about the benefits of habits. The argument goes like this: will habits make my life dull? I don't want to pigeonhole myself into a lifestyle I don't enjoy. Doesn't so much routine take away the vibrancy and spontaneity of life? Hardly. Such questions set up a false dichotomy. They make you think that you have to choose between building habits and attaining freedom. In reality, the two complement each other. Habits do not restrict freedom, they create it. In fact, the people who don't have their habits handled are often the ones with the least amount of freedom. Without good financial habits, you will always be struggling for the next dollar. Without good health habits, you will always seem to be short on energy. Without good learning habits, you will always feel like you're behind the curve. If you're always being forced to make decisions about simple tasks, when should I work out? Where do I go to write? When do I pay the bills? Then you have less time for freedom. It's only by making the fundamentals of life easier that you can create the mental space needed for free thinking and creativity. Conversely, when you have your habits dialed in and the basics of life are handled and done, your mind is free to focus on new challenges and master the next set of problems. Building habits in the present allows you to do more of what you want in the future. The process of building a habit can be divided into 4 simple steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. Breaking it down into these fundamental parts can help us understand what a habit is, how it works, and how to improve it. This 4-step pattern is the backbone of every habit, and your brain runs through these steps in the same order each time. First, there is the cue. The cue triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. It is a bit of information that predicts a reward. Our prehistoric ancestors were paying attention to cues that signaled the location of primary rewards like food, water, and sex. Today, we spend most of our time learning cues that predict secondary rewards like money and fame, power and status, praise and approval, love and friendship, or a sense of personal satisfaction. Of course, these pursuits also indirectly improve our odds of survival and reproduction, which is the deeper motive behind everything we do. Your mind is continuously analyzing your internal and external environment for hints of where rewards are located. Because the cue is the first indication that we're close to a reward, it naturally leads to a craving. Cravings are the second step, and they are the motivational force behind every habit. Without some level of motivation or desire, without craving a change, we have no reason to act. What you crave is not the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. You do not crave smoking a cigarette, you crave the feeling of relief it provides. You are not motivated by brushing your teeth, but rather by the feeling of a clean mouth. You do not want to turn on the television, you want to be entertained. Every craving is linked to a desire to change your internal state. This is an important point that we will discuss in detail later. Cravings differ from person to person. In theory, any piece of information could trigger a craving, but in practice, people are not motivated by the same cues. For a gambler, the sound of slot machines can be a potent trigger that sparks an intense wave of desire. For someone who rarely gambles, the jingles and chimes of the casino are just background noise. Cues are meaningless until they are interpreted. The thoughts, feelings, and emotions of the observer are what transform a cue into a craving. The third step is the response. The response is the actual habit you perform, which can take the form of a thought or an action. Whether a response occurs depends on how motivated you are and how much friction is associated with the behavior. If a particular action requires more physical or mental effort than you are willing to expend, then you won't do it. Your response also depends on your ability. It sounds simple, but a habit can occur only if you are capable of doing it. If you want to dunk a basketball but can't jump high enough to reach the hoop, well, you're out of luck. Finally, the response delivers a reward. Rewards are the end goal of every habit. The cue is about noticing the reward. The craving is about wanting the reward. The response is about obtaining the reward. We chase rewards because they serve 2 purposes. 1, they satisfy us, and 2, they teach us. The first purpose of rewards is to satisfy your craving. Yes, rewards provide benefits on their own. Food and water deliver the energy you need to survive. Getting a promotion brings more money and respect. Getting in shape improves your health and your dating prospects. But the more immediate benefit is that rewards satisfy your craving to eat, or to gain status, or to win approval. At least for a moment, rewards deliver contentment and relief from craving. Second, rewards teach us which actions are worth remembering in the future. Your brain is a reward detector. As you go about your life, Your sensory nervous system is continuously monitoring which actions satisfy your desires and deliver pleasure. Feelings of pleasure and disappointment are part of the feedback mechanism that helps your brain distinguish useful actions from useless ones. Rewards close the feedback loop and complete the habit cycle. If a behavior is insufficient in any of the 4 stages, it will not become a habit. Eliminate the cue and your habit will never start. Reduce the craving and you won't experience enough motivation to act. Make the behavior difficult and you won't be able to do it. And if the reward fails to satisfy your desire, then you'll have no reason to do it again in the future. Without the first 3 steps, a behavior will not occur. Without all 4, a behavior will not be repeated. Chapter 3. Continued. How to build better habits in 4 simple steps. These 4 steps are best described as a neurological feedback loop: cue, craving, response, reward, cue, craving, response, reward, that ultimately allows you to create automatic habits. This cycle is known as the habit loop. This process is not something that happens occasionally, but rather, it is an endless feedback loop that is running and active during every moment you are alive. Even now, the brain is continually scanning the environment, predicting what will happen next, trying out different responses, and learning from the results. The entire process is completed in a split second, and we use it again and again without realizing everything that has been packed into the previous moment. We can split these 4 steps into 2 phases: the problem phase and the solution phase. The problem phase includes the cue and the craving, and it is when you realize that something needs to change. The solution phase includes the response and the reward, and it is when you take action and achieve the change you desire. All behavior is driven by the desire to solve a problem. Sometimes the problem is that you notice something good and you want to obtain it. Sometimes the problem is that you are experiencing pain and you want to relieve it. Either way, the purpose of every habit is to solve the problems you face. Consider the simple act of turning on a light. You walk into a dark room, which is the cue. You want to be able to see, which is the craving. You flip the light switch, which is the response. You can see, which is the reward. Turning on the light switch becomes associated with being in a dark room. Or consider a professional scenario. You hit a stumbling block on a project at work, serving as the cue. You feel stuck and want to relieve your frustration, creating the craving. You pull out your phone and check social media, providing the response. You feel relieved, securing the reward. Checking social media becomes associated with feeling stalled at work. By the time we become adults, we rarely notice the habits that are running our lives. Most of us never give a second thought to the fact that we tie the same shoe first each morning, or unplug the toaster after each use, or always change into comfortable clothes after getting home from work. After decades of mental programming, we automatically slip into these patterns of thinking and acting. To apply this knowledge practically, we can transform these 4 steps into a framework called the 4 laws of behavior change. This framework provides a simple set of rules for creating good habits and breaking bad ones. You can think of each law as a lever that influences human behavior. When the levers are in the right positions, creating good habits is effortless. When they are in the wrong positions, it is nearly impossible. To create a good habit, you must apply the 4 laws in order. The first law, corresponding to the cue, is to make it obvious. The second law, corresponding to the craving, is to make it attractive. The third law, corresponding to the response, is to make it easy. The fourth law, corresponding to the reward, is to make it satisfying. Conversely, to break a bad habit, you simply invert these laws. To eliminate a bad habit, the inversion of the first law is to make it invisible. The inversion of the second law is to make it unattractive. The inversion of the third law is to make it difficult. The inversion of the fourth law is to make it unsatisfying. It would be irresponsible to claim that these 4 laws are an exhaustive framework for changing any human behavior, but they are close. They apply to nearly every field, from sports to politics, art to medicine, comedy to management. Whenever you want to change your behavior, you can simply ask yourself, how can I make it obvious? How can I make it attractive? How can I make it easy? How can I make it satisfying? If you have ever wondered why you don't do what you say you're going to do, or why you don't lose the weight or stop smoking, the answers can be found somewhere in these 4 laws. The key to creating good habits and breaking bad ones is to understand these fundamental laws and how to alter them to your specifications. Every goal is doomed to fail if it goes against the grain of human nature. Chapter 4. The Man Who Didn't Look Right. The psychologist Gary Klein once shared a story about a woman who attended a family gathering. Having spent years working as a paramedic, she arrived at the event and immediately felt a sense of concern upon seeing her father-in-law. "I don't like the way you look," she told him. Her father-in-law, who felt perfectly fine, joked, "Well, I don't like your looks either." "No," she insisted. "You need to go to the hospital now." A few hours later, the man underwent life-saving surgery. An examination revealed a blockage in a major artery, placing him at immediate risk of a heart attack. Without his daughter-in-law's intuition, he could have died. What did the paramedic see? How did she predict his impending heart attack? When major arteries are obstructed, the body prioritizes sending blood to critical organs, diverting it away from peripheral locations near the skin's surface. This results in a specific change in the distribution of blood in the face. After years of working with heart failure patients, the woman had unknowingly developed the ability to recognize this pattern on sight. She couldn't explain exactly what she noticed in her father-in-law's face, but she knew something was wrong. Similar stories exist across various fields. Military analysts can distinguish between an enemy missile and a plane from their own fleet on a radar screen, even though they travel at the same speed, fly at the same altitude, and look identical in nearly every respect. During the Gulf War, Lieutenant Commander Michael Riley saved an entire battleship by ordering a missile shot down, despite it looking exactly like the ship's own planes on radar. He made the right call, yet even his superior officers couldn't explain how he did it. Museum curators have been known to discern the difference between an authentic piece of art and an expertly produced counterfeit, even though they often can't articulate exactly which details tipped them off. Experienced radiologists can look at a brain scan and predict the area where a stroke will develop before any obvious signs are visible to the untrained eye. Even hairdressers have been known to notice whether a client is pregnant based solely on the feel of their hair. The human brain is a prediction machine. It continuously takes in your surroundings and analyzes the information it encounters. Whenever you experience something repeatedly, like a paramedic seeing the face of a heart attack patient or a military analyst tracking a blip on a radar screen, your brain begins noticing what is important, sorting through details, highlighting relevant cues, and cataloging that information for future use. With enough practice, you can pick up on the cues that predict certain outcomes without consciously thinking about it. Your brain automatically encodes the lessons learned through experience. We can't always explain what we are learning, but learning is happening all along the way. Your ability to notice relevant cues in a given situation is the foundation for every habit you possess. We often underestimate how much our brains and bodies can do without thinking. You do not tell your hair to grow, your heart to pump, your lungs to breathe, or your stomach to digest. Yet your body handles all this and more on autopilot. You are much more than your conscious self. Consider hunger. How do you know when you're hungry? You don't necessarily have to see a cookie on the counter to realize it's time to eat. Appetite and hunger are governed non-consciously. Your body has a variety of feedback loops that gradually alert you when it is time to eat again, tracking what is going on around you and within you. Cravings can arise thanks to hormones and chemicals circulating through your body. Suddenly you feel hungry even though you're not quite sure what tipped you off. This is one of the most surprising insights about our habits. You don't need to be aware of the cue for a habit to begin. You can notice an opportunity and take action without dedicating conscious attention to it. This is what makes habits useful. It's also what makes them dangerous. As habits form, your actions come under the direction of your automatic and non-conscious mind. You fall into old patterns before you realize what's happening. Unless someone points it out, you may not notice that you cover your mouth with your hand whenever you laugh, that you apologize before asking a question, or that you have a habit of finishing other people's sentences. And the more you repeat these patterns, the less likely you become to question what you're doing and why you're doing it. I once heard of a retail clerk who was instructed to cut up empty gift cards after customers had used up the balance. One day, the clerk cashed out a few customers in a row who paid with gift cards. When the next person walked up, the clerk swiped the customer's actual credit card, picked up the scissors, and cut it in half, entirely on autopilot, before looking up at the stunned customer and realizing what had just happened. Another woman, a former preschool teacher who had switched to a corporate job, found herself asking co-workers if they had washed their hands after going to the bathroom. Even though she was now working with adults, her old habits would kick in. I also found the story of a man who had spent years working as a lifeguard and would occasionally yell "walk" whenever he saw a child running. Over time, the cues that spark our habits become so common that they are essentially invisible. The treats on the kitchen counter, the remote control next to the couch, the phone in our pocket. Our responses to these cues are so deeply encoded that it may feel like the urge to act comes from nowhere. For this reason, we must begin the process of behavior change with awareness. Before we can effectively build new habits, we need to get a handle on our current ones. This can be more challenging than it sounds because once a habit is firmly rooted in your life, it is mostly non-conscious and automatic. If a habit remains mindless, you can't expect to improve it. As the psychologist Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The Japanese railway system is regarded as one of the best in the world. If you ever ride a train in Tokyo, you'll notice that the conductors have a peculiar habit. As each operator runs the train, they proceed through a ritual of pointing at different objects and calling out commands. When the train approaches a signal, the operator will point at it and say, "Signal is green." As the train pulls into and out of each station, the operator will point at the speedometer and call out the exact speed. When it's time to leave, the operator will point at the timetable and state the time. Out on the platform, other employees are performing similar actions. Before each train departs, staff members will point along the edge of the platform and declare, "All clear." Every detail is identified, pointed at, and named aloud. This process, known as pointing and calling, is a safety system designed to reduce mistakes. It seems silly, but it works incredibly well. Pointing and calling reduces errors by up to 85% and cuts accidents by 30%. The MTA subway system in New York City adopted a modified version that is point only, and within 2 years of implementation, incidents of incorrectly berthed subways fell 57%. Pointing and calling is effective because it raises the level of awareness from a non-conscious habit to a more conscious level. Because the train operators must use their eyes, hands, mouth, and ears, they are more likely to notice problems before something goes wrong. My wife does something similar. Whenever we are preparing to walk out the door for a trip, she verbally calls out the most essential items in her packing list. "I've got my keys, I've got my wallet, I've got my glasses, I've got my husband." The more automatic a behavior becomes, the less likely we are to consciously think about it. And when we've done something 1,000 times before, we begin to overlook things. We assume that the next time will be just like the last. We're so used to doing what we've always done that we don't stop to question whether it's the right thing to do at all. Many of our failures in performance are largely attributable to a lack of self-awareness. One of our greatest challenges in changing habits is maintaining awareness of what we are actually doing. This helps explain why the consequences of bad habits can sneak up on us. We need a point and call system for our personal lives. That's the origin of the Habits Scorecard, which is a simple exercise you can use to become more aware of your behavior. To create your own, make a list of your daily habits. Here's a sample of where your list might start. Wake up, turn off alarm, check my phone, go to the bathroom, weigh myself, take a shower, brush my teeth, floss my teeth, put on deodorant, hang up towel to dry, get dressed, make a cup of tea, and so on. Once you have a full list, look at each behavior and ask yourself, is this a good habit, a bad habit, or a neutral habit? If it is a good habit, write "or" next to it. If it is a bad habit, write. If it is a neutral habit, write X. For example, the list above might look like this. Wake up equals, turn off alarm equals, check my phone. Go to the bathroom equals, weigh myself plus take a shower plus brush my teeth plus floss my teeth plus put on deodorant plus hang up towel to dry is get dressed, you'll make a cup of tea plus the marks you give to a particular habit will depend on your situation and your goals. For someone who is trying to lose weight, eating a bagel with peanut butter every morning might be a bad habit. For someone who is trying to bulk up and add muscle, the same behavior might be a good habit. It all depends on what you're working toward. Scoring your habits can be a bit more complex for another reason as well. The labels good habit and bad habit are slightly inaccurate. There are no good habits or bad habits. There are only effective habits. That is, effective at solving problems. All habits serve you in some way, even the bad ones, which is why you repeat them. For this exercise, categorize your habits by how they will benefit you in the long run. Generally speaking, good habits will have net positive outcomes. Bad habits have net negative outcomes. Smoking a cigarette may reduce stress right now, that's how it's serving you, but it's not a healthy long-term behavior. If you're still having trouble determining how to rate a particular habit, here is a question I like to use. Does this behavior help me become the type of person I wish to be? Does this habit cast a vote for or against my desired identity? Habits that reinforce your desired identity are usually good. Habits that conflict with your desired identity are usually bad. As you create your habits scorecard, there is no need to change anything at first. The goal is to simply notice what is actually going on. Observe your thoughts and actions without judgment or internal criticism. Don't blame yourself for your faults. Don't praise yourself for your successes. If you eat a chocolate bar every morning, acknowledge it, almost as if you were watching someone else. Oh, how interesting that they would do such a thing. If you binge eat, simply notice that you are eating more calories than you should. If you waste time online, notice that you are spending your life in a way that you do not want to. The first step to changing bad habits is to be on the lookout for them. If you feel like you need extra help, then you can try pointing and calling in your own life. Say out loud the action that you are thinking of taking and what the outcome will be. If you want to cut back on your junk food habit but notice yourself grabbing another cookie, say out loud, "I'm about to eat this cookie, but I don't need it. Eating it will cause me to gain weight and hurt my health." Hearing your bad habits spoken aloud makes the consequences seem more real. It adds weight to the action rather than letting yourself mindlessly slip into an old routine. This approach is useful even if you're simply trying to remember a task on your to-do list. Just saying out loud, "Tomorrow I need to go to the post office after lunch," increases the odds that you'll actually do it. You're getting yourself to acknowledge the need for action, and that can make all the difference. The process of behavior change always starts with awareness. Strategies like pointing and calling and the habits scorecard are focused on getting you to recognize your habits and acknowledge the cues that trigger them, which makes it possible to respond in a way that benefits you. Chapter 5. The best way to start a new habit. In 2001, researchers in Great Britain conducted a study with 248 people to see how they could build better exercise habits over a 2-week period. The subjects were divided into 3 groups. The first group was the control group, who were simply asked to track how often they exercised. The second group was the motivation group. They were asked to track their workouts, but also read material on the benefits of exercise and listened to a presentation on how it could reduce the risk of heart disease. Finally, there was a third group. These subjects received the same motivational presentation as the second group, but they were also asked to formulate a specific plan for when and where they would exercise. Specifically, they completed a sentence that said, "During the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on, day, at time, in place." The results were striking. In the first and second groups, only 35 to 38% of people exercised at least once per week. Surprisingly, the motivational presentation given to the second group had no meaningful impact on their behavior compared to the control group. However, 91% of the third group exercised at least once per week, more than double the normal rate. The sentence they filled out is what researchers call an implementation intention, which is a plan you make beforehand about when and where to act. That is, how you intend to implement a particular habit. The cues that can trigger a habit come in a wide range of forms, but the 2 most common cues are time and location. Implementation intentions leverage both of these cues. Broadly speaking, the format for creating an implementation intention is, when situation X arises, I will perform response Y. Hundreds of studies have shown that implementation intentions are effective for sticking to goals, whether it is writing down the exact time and date of a flu shot or recording the time of a colonoscopy appointment. They increase the odds that people will stick with habits like recycling, studying, going to sleep early, and stopping smoking. The punchline is clear. People who make a specific plan for when and where they will perform a new habit are more likely to follow through. Too many people try to change their habits without these basic details figured out. We tell ourselves, "I'm going to eat healthier," or "I'm going to write more." But we never say when and where these habits are going to happen. We leave it up to chance and hope that we will simply remember to do it or feel motivated at the right time. An implementation intention sweeps away foggy notions like, "I want to work out more," and transforms them into a concrete plan of action. Many people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. It is not always obvious when and where to take action. Once an implementation intention has been set, you don't have to wait for inspiration to strike. When the moment of action occurs, there is no need to make a decision. Simply follow your predetermined plan. There is another benefit to implementation intentions. Being specific about what you want and how you will achieve it helps you say no to things that derail progress, distract your attention, and pull you off course. We often say yes to little requests because we are not clear enough about what we need to be doing instead. When your dreams are vague, it's easy to rationalize little exceptions all day long and never get around to the specific things you need to do to succeed. Give your habits a time and a space to live in the world. The goal is to make the time and location so obvious that, with enough repetition, you get an urge to do the right thing at the right time, even if you can't say why. There are many ways to use implementation intentions in your life and work. One of the best ways is a strategy known as habit stacking. The French philosopher Denis Diderot lived nearly his entire life in poverty, but that all changed one day in 1765. His daughter was about to be married and he could not afford to pay for the wedding. Despite his lack of wealth, Diderot was well known for his role as the co-founder and writer of Encyclopédie, one of the most comprehensive encyclopedias of the time. When Catherine the Great, the Empress of Russia, heard of Diderot's financial troubles, she offered to buy his personal library for a large sum. Suddenly, Diderot had money to spare. With his new wealth, he acquired a scarlet robe. The robe was beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that Diderot immediately noticed how out of place it seemed when surrounded by his more common possessions. He wrote that there was no more coordination, no more unity, no more beauty between his elegant robe and the rest of his stuff. He soon felt the urge to upgrade his possessions. He replaced his rug with one from Damascus. He decorated his home with expensive sculptures. He bought a mirror to place above the mantel and a better kitchen table. He tossed aside his old straw chair for a leather one. Like falling dominoes, one purchase led to the next. This tendency for one purchase to lead to another one has a name: the Diderot effect. The Diderot effect states that obtaining a new possession often creates a spiral of consumption that leads to additional purchases. You can spot this pattern everywhere. You buy a dress and have to get new shoes and earrings to match. You buy a couch and suddenly question the layout of your entire living room. Many human behaviors follow this cycle. You often decide what to do next based on what you have just finished doing. Going to the bathroom leads to washing and drying your hands, which reminds you that you need to put the dirty towels in the laundry. So you add laundry detergent to the shopping list and so on. No behavior happens in isolation. Each action becomes a cue that triggers the next behavior. When it comes to building new habits, you can use the connectedness of behavior to your advantage. One of the best ways to build a new habit is to identify a current habit you already do each day and then stack your new behavior on top. This is called habit stacking. Habit stacking is a special form of an implementation intention. Rather than pairing your new habit with a particular time and location, you pair it with a current habit. The habit stacking formula is: after current habit, I will new habit. For example, if you want to meditate, you might say, after I pour my cup of coffee each morning, I will meditate for 1 minute. If you want to exercise, after I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. If you want to improve your gratitude practice, after I sit down to dinner, I will say one thing I'm grateful for that happened today. The key is to tie your desired behavior into something you already do each day. Once you have mastered this basic structure, you can begin to create larger stacks by chaining small habits together. This allows you to take advantage of the natural momentum that comes from one behavior leading into the next. Your morning routine habit stack might look like this. After I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will meditate for 60 seconds. After I meditate for 60 seconds, I will write my to-do list for the day. After I write my to-do list for the day, I will immediately begin my first task. You can also insert new behaviors into the middle of your current routines. For example, if your morning routine is wake up, make my bed, take a shower, and you want to develop the habit of reading more, you can change it to wake up, make my bed, place a book on my pillow, take a shower. Now, when you climb into bed each night, a book will be sitting there waiting for you to enjoy. Overall, habit stacking allows you to create a set of simple rules that guide your future behavior. It's like you always have a game plan for which action should come next. No matter how you use this strategy, the secret to creating a successful habit stack is selecting the right cue to kick things off. Unlike an implementation intention, which specifically states the time and location for a given behavior, habit stacking implicitly has the time and location built into it. When and where you choose to insert a habit into your daily routine can make a big difference. If you're trying to add meditation into your morning routine, but mornings are chaotic and your kids keep running into the room, then that may be the wrong place and time. Consider when you are most likely to be successful. Don't ask yourself to do a habit when you're likely to be occupied with something else. Your cue should also have the same frequency as your desired habit. If you want to do a habit every day, but you stack it on top of a habit that only happens on Mondays, that's not a good choice. One way to find the right trigger for your habit stack is by brainstorming a list of your current habits. You can use your habits scorecard from the last chapter as a starting point. Alternatively, you can create a list with 2 columns. In the first column, write down the habits you do each day without fail. In the second column, write down all of the things that happen to you each day without fail. Habit stacking works best when the cue is highly specific and immediately actionable. Many people select cues that are too vague. I made this mistake myself. When I wanted to start a push-up habit, my habit stack was, when I take a break for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups. At first glance, this sounded reasonable, but soon I realized the trigger was unclear. Would I do my push-ups before I ate lunch? After I ate lunch? Where would I do them? After a few inconsistent days, I changed my habit stack to, when I close my laptop for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups next to my desk. Ambiguity gone. The first law of behavior change is to make it obvious. Strategies like implementation intentions and habit stacking are among the most practical ways to create obvious cues for your habits and design a clear plan for when and where to take action. Chapter 6. Motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. Anne Thorndike, a physician based in Boston, initiated a unique study to improve the dietary habits of hospital staff and visitors without ever speaking to them or attempting to boost their willpower. She believed that by altering the physical layout of the hospital cafeteria, she could influence people to make healthier choices automatically. Her plan focused on the placement of beverages. Originally, the refrigerators next to the cash registers were filled exclusively with soda. Water was only available at a separate fountain. Thorndike and her team added water bottles to the primary refrigerators and placed baskets of bottled water at various food stations throughout the room. Soda was still available, but water was now the most accessible option. Within months, soda sales dropped significantly, while water sales surged. No one had been told to drink less soda. The environment simply nudged them toward a better decision. Human behavior is often shaped by the invisible hand of the environment. We like to believe that we are in control of our choices, making decisions based on our own desires and motivations. In reality, however, many of the actions we take each day are not the result of purposeful drive, but rather the most obvious option presented to us. We buy products because they are at eye level on the shelf. We snack on cookies because they are sitting open on the counter. We check our phones because they are right next to our hands. The world around us exerts a magnetic pull on our behavior, often directing us without our conscious permission. This truth suggests that if you want to change your behavior, you do not necessarily need more motivation or stronger willpower. You simply need a better environment. The most common form of change is not internal, but external. We are changed by the world around us. Every habit is context-dependent. In 1936, psychologist Kurt Lewin composed a simple equation that makes a powerful statement. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment. While every sense receives information, vision is the most powerful among them. The human body has about 11 million sensory receptors, and approximately 10 million of those are dedicated to sight. Because we are so heavily dependent on vision, visual cues are the greatest catalyst of our behavior. For this reason, a small change in what you see can lead to a big shift in what you do. If you want to take your medication, placing the pill bottle directly on the bathroom counter makes the habit far more likely than if the bottle is hidden inside a cabinet. If you want to practice guitar, placing the instrument on a stand in the middle of the living room is far more effective than keeping it in a closet. The more obvious the cue, the more likely you are to notice it and act on it. Unfortunately, most of us live in environments that are designed by others, often to our detriment. We live in spaces filled with cues that trigger bad habits. But you can alter the spaces where you live and work to increase your exposure to positive cues and reduce your exposure to negative ones. This is the essence of environment design. It allows you to take back control and become the architect of your world rather than the victim of it. When you redesign your environment, you are essentially making the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad habits invisible. If you want to drink more water, fill up a few water bottles each morning and place them in common locations around your house. If you want to read a book, place it on your pillow when you make your bed in the morning. If you want to eat more vegetables, don't hide them in the crisper drawer. Put them in a bowl on the countertop. When the cues that spark a habit are subtle or hidden, they are easy to ignore. When they are right in front of you, the decision becomes automatic. Over time, our habits become associated not just with a single trigger, but with the entire context surrounding the behavior. We mentally assign specific habits to specific locations. For one person, the couch is the place where they read for an hour each night. For another, the couch is where they watch television and eat ice cream after work. Different people can have different memories and habits tied to the same place. The good news is that you can train yourself to link a particular habit with a particular context. One way to do this is to create a separate space for work, study, exercise, entertainment, and cooking. The mantra is, one space, one use. When you mix contexts, you start to mix habits, and the easier, more immediate behaviors will usually win out. If you try to work in bed, you might find yourself falling asleep or checking email instead of focusing. If you try to relax in the same chair where you do your taxes, you might feel stressed. This is why it is often easier to build new habits in a new environment. If you can't manage to get to a new environment, redefine your current one. Arrange a specific chair for reading and another for watching television. Even in a small apartment, you can create activity zones. A chair for reading, a desk for writing, a table for eating. Environment design allows you to stop fighting against your surroundings and start making them work for you. It removes the friction that holds you back from good habits and adds the friction that stops you from bad ones. It is easier to make the right choice when the right choice is the obvious one. Stable environments create stable habits. If you can create a space where the cues for your desired habits are abundant and visible, you will find it far easier to follow through. Ultimately, the most disciplined people are not those with the most willpower, but those who have designed their lives so they do not need to use willpower very often. They spend less time in tempting situations and more time in environments that naturally pull them towards success. Chapter 7. The Secret to Self-Control. In 1971, as the Vietnam War entered its 16th year, 2 congressmen made a startling discovery that shook the American public. While visiting troops, they found that over 15% of U.S. soldiers stationed in Vietnam were addicted to heroin. Subsequent research revealed the problem was even more pervasive. 35% of service members had tried heroin, and as many as 20% were addicted. This revelation triggered the creation of a special government office focused on drug abuse prevention and rehabilitation to track and treat these soldiers upon their return. The task of overseeing this research fell to Lee Robbins, who soon uncovered a finding that completely overturned the accepted understanding of addiction. Conventional wisdom held that heroin addiction was a permanent, irreversible condition. However, Robbins found that when addicted soldiers returned to the United States, only 5% became re-addicted within a year, and just 12% relapsed within 3 years. In other words, approximately 9 out of 10 soldiers who were addicted to heroin in Vietnam eliminated their addiction almost overnight. This phenomenon contradicted everything the medical community believed about addiction. The key factor was the environment. In Vietnam, soldiers were surrounded by cues that triggered heroin use. High stress, easy access to the drug, and the camaraderie of fellow users. Once a soldier returned home, however, he was placed in an environment devoid of those specific triggers. The context changed, and consequently, so did the habit. This is a stark contrast to the typical drug user who goes to a rehabilitation clinic, a place free of environmental triggers, to get clean, only to return to their old neighborhood, where all the previous cues remain, leading to high relapse rates. These findings challenge the deeply held cultural belief that unhealthy behavior is primarily the result of moral weakness or a lack of willpower. We are often taught that if we are overweight, smokers, or addicts, it is because we lack self-control. The assumption is that with enough discipline, we could solve our problems. However, recent research suggests that people who appear to have tremendous self-control are not actually that different from those who struggle. Instead, disciplined individuals are simply better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic amounts of willpower. They spend less time in tempting situations. The people with the best self-control are typically the ones who need to use it the least. It is far easier to practice self-restraint when you do not have to use it constantly. Perseverance, grit, and willpower are essential for success. But the most effective way to improve these qualities is not by wishing for more discipline, but by creating a more disciplined environment. This concept becomes clear when we understand how habits are formed in the brain. Once a habit has been encoded, the urge to act follows whenever the relevant environmental cues reappear. This is known as cue-induced wanting. An external trigger causes a compulsive craving to repeat a bad habit. For example, a former smoker who hasn't touched a cigarette in years may suddenly feel a craving when they encounter a specific situation or friend associated with their old habit. The cues are still internalized. They just haven't been exposed to them for a long time. This explains why simply resisting temptation is an ineffective long-term strategy. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to constantly ignore the cues that drive our behavior. In the short run, you can choose to overpower temptation. In the long run, however, you become a product of the environment you live in. It is nearly impossible to maintain positive habits in a negative environment consistently. A more reliable approach is to cut bad habits off at the source. This is the inversion of the first law of behavior change: make it invisible. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. If you cannot get work done because of your phone, leave it in another room. If you feel inadequate because of social media, stop following accounts that trigger jealousy. If you waste time watching television, move the TV out of the bedroom. By removing a single cue, the entire habit often fades away. Self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. You may be able to resist temptation once or twice, but you cannot rely on willpower to override your desires every single time. Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy is better spent optimizing your environment. The secret to self-control is not to strengthen your internal resolve, but to make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad habits invisible. Chapter 8. How to make a habit irresistible. In the 1940s, a Dutch scientist named Nico Tinbergen performed a series of experiments that would eventually earn him a Nobel Prize. Tinbergen was investigating the behavior of herring gulls, gray and white birds, often seen flying along the seacoasts of North America and Europe. He noticed that adult gulls have a small red spot on their yellow beaks. Whenever the adults returned to the nest with food, the newborn chicks would peck at this red spot, stimulating the parent to regurgitate the meal for them. Tinbergen decided to test how specific this preference was. He created a collection of fake cardboard beaks, ranging from realistic representations to bizarre exaggerations. When he presented a perfect cardboard replica to the chicks, they pecked at it just as they would a real beak. However, when he presented a large beak with 3 red dots instead of 1, the chicks went crazy, pecking at it with far more enthusiasm than they showed for their own mother. The exaggerated cue created a stronger response. Tinbergen later discovered similar behavior in the greylag goose. These birds are ground nesting, and occasionally an egg will roll out of the nest. Instinctively, the mother goose will waddle over to the egg and use her beak and neck to roll it back. Tinbergen found that the goose would pull back any round object placed nearby, including a billiard ball or a light bulb. When he placed a volleyball next to the nest, the goose ignored her own eggs and tried desperately to roll the giant ball back. She was captivated by the supernormal stimulus. Humans are also prone to falling for exaggerated versions of reality. Our brains evolved in a world where food was scarce and rewards were hard to find. Today, however, we live in an environment packed with supernormal stimuli. We have candy bars that are more sugary than any fruit found in nature. We have video games that are more exciting than ordinary life. We have social media feeds that provide more social validation in 5 minutes than we could get in a month of face-to-face conversation. These engineered experiences are designed to be irresistible, lighting up our reward systems like a Christmas tree. This is the biological signature that all habits share, a spike in dopamine. In 1954, neuroscientists James Olds and Peter Milner ran an experiment that revealed the neurological processes behind craving. They implanted electrodes in the brains of rats to block the release of dopamine. To the surprise of the researchers, the rats lost all will to live. They wouldn't eat, they wouldn't drink, they wouldn't reproduce. Within a few days, the animals died of thirst. Conversely, when researchers allowed the rats to self-stimulate the dopamine-releasing centers of their brains by pressing a lever, the rats went into a frenzy, pressing the lever up to 800 times per hour until they collapsed from exhaustion. Dopamine is the primary driver of the brain's reward system. It is not just about pleasure, it is about desire. Habits are a dopamine-driven feedback loop. Every behavior that is highly habit-forming, taking drugs, eating junk food, playing video games, scrolling through social media, is associated with higher levels of dopamine. The most interesting finding, however, is that dopamine is released not only when you experience pleasure, but also when you anticipate it. When you see a cue that indicates a reward is coming, your brain spikes with dopamine before you even take action. This anticipation is what motivates you to act. Gambling addicts experience a dopamine spike right before they place a bet, not after they win. Cocaine addicts get a surge of dopamine when they see the powder, not just after they take it. It is the craving, not the fulfillment, that drives the behavior. This distinction between wanting and liking is crucial. The brain has far more neural circuitry allocated for wanting rewards than for liking them. This is why we can become obsessed with things that we don't even particularly enjoy once we get them. The second law of behavior change is to make it attractive. If we want to increase the odds that a behavior will occur, we need to make it satisfying and appealing. While we cannot always transform a difficult task into a supernormal stimulus, we can use a strategy known as temptation bundling to make our habits more attractive. Temptation bundling works by linking an action you want to do with an action you need to do. It was famously utilized by an engineering student in Ireland named Ronan Byrne. He knew he needed to exercise more, but he also knew he wanted to watch Netflix. Using his engineering skills, he hacked his stationary bike and connected it to his laptop and TV. He wrote a computer program that would only allow Netflix to play if he was cycling at a certain speed. If he slowed down for too long, the show would pause. He was literally bundling temptation. He eliminated the friction of exercising by pairing it with the entertainment he craved. You can apply this strategy to your own life by combining temptation bundling with the habit stacking formula we discussed earlier. The advanced formula looks like this. After current habit, I will, habit I need. After habit I need, I will, habit I want. For example, if you want to check Facebook but you need to exercise more, after I pull out my phone, I will do 10 burpees, habit I need. After I do 10 burpees, I will check Facebook, habit I want. If you want to watch sports, but you need to make sales calls, after I get back from my lunch break, I will call 3 potential clients, habit I need. After I call 3 potential clients, I will check ESPN, habit I want. The goal is to use your natural desires to pull you through the necessary work. By bundling the things you have to do with the things you love to do, you can create a heightened sense of motivation and make any habit more attractive. Chapter 9. The role of family and friends in shaping your habits. In 1965, a Hungarian man named Laszlo Polgar began a unique experiment with a bold premise. He believed that geniuses were not born, but made. Rejecting the notion of innate talent, he argued that with deliberate practice and the right development of habits, any child could become elite in any field. To prove this, he and his wife, Clara, decided to raise their children as chess prodigies. Their home became a shrine to the game, filled with chess books and pictures of famous players. The children were homeschooled and spent their days playing against each other and competing in tournaments. The results were undeniable. Their 3 daughters, Susan, Sophia, and Judith, rose to the pinnacle of the chess world. Susan became a grandmaster. Sophia achieved world champion status. Judith, the youngest, became the youngest grandmaster of all time, surpassing a record previously held by Bobby Fischer, and spent 27 years as the #1 ranked female player in the world. To an outsider, their childhood might have seemed grueling, but the sisters recalled it as entertaining. In their household, playing chess for hours was simply what people did. It was normal, accepted, and praised. The culture of their family made the habit of playing chess irresistibly attractive. Humans are herd animals. We have a deep, ancestral drive to fit in, to bond with others, and to earn the respect of our peers. For most of human history, living in a tribe was essential for survival. Being cast out meant death. As a result, the desire to belong is one of the most powerful influences on our behavior. We do not choose our earliest habits. We imitate them. We follow the scripts handed down by our families, our schools, and our communities. These social norms act as invisible rules that guide our daily actions. Behaviors are attractive when they help us fit in. We tend to imitate the habits of 3 distinct groups: the close, the many, and the powerful. First, we imitate the close. Proximity has a staggering effect on our behavior. Just as we are influenced by the physical environment, we are shaped by the social environment. We pick up the habits of the people around us, copying the way our parents handle conflict, the way our peers flirt, or the way our colleagues work. Research has shown that if your best friend becomes obese, your risk of obesity increases by 57%. We soak up the qualities and practices of those we spend time with. One of the most effective strategies for building better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. New habits seem achievable when you see others doing them every day. If you want to get fit, surround yourself with fit people. If you want to read more, join a book club. Your culture sets your expectation for what is normal. To make this even more powerful, you should join a group where your desired behavior is the normal behavior and you already have something else in common with the group. Shared interests build the bridge of friendship, and friendship embeds the new habit into your identity. Second, we imitate the many. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a series of experiments on social conformity. He placed subjects in a room with actors who were instructed to give obviously incorrect answers to simple questions about the length of lines on a card. Ash found that a significant percentage of subjects would eventually doubt their own eyes and go along with the group's incorrect answer rather than risk standing out. The human mind wants to get along with others. The reward of being accepted is often greater than the reward of being right. When changing your habits means challenging the tribe, the change feels unattractive. It requires effort to run against the grain of your culture. However, when changing your habits means fitting in with the tribe, the change becomes very attractive. We are constantly scanning our environment to see what everyone else is doing, and we often follow the crowd because there is safety in numbers. Third, we imitate the powerful. We are drawn to behaviors that earn us respect, approval, admiration, and status. Historically, a person with greater power had access to more resources and better mating opportunities. Today, we still desire the prestige that comes with success. We try to copy the behaviors of successful people because we hope to achieve the same results. We pay attention to the habits of industry leaders, famous artists, and top athletes. Conversely, we avoid behaviors that might lower our status. We trim our hedges and dress neatly to avoid being judged by others. The culture we live in determines which behaviors are attractive to us. We tend to adopt habits that are praised and approved of by our culture because we have a strong desire to belong. If a behavior can get us approval, respect, and praise, we find it attractive. The Polgar sisters sustained their chess habits for decades, not just because they were good at it, but because their world rewarded them for it. To make a habit stick, it helps if the behavior is socially reinforced. Chapter 10. How to find and fix the causes of your bad habits. Chapter 11. Walk slowly, but never backward. On the first day of class, Jerry Ullsman, a professor at the University of Florida, divided his film photography students into two distinct groups. Everyone on the left side of the classroom was placed in the quantity group. They were told that their grade would be determined solely by the amount of work they produced. On the final day of the semester, the professor would tally the number of photos submitted by each student. If a student turned in 100 photos, they would receive an A. 90 photos would earn a B, 80 photos a C, and so on. Meanwhile, everyone on the right side of the room was assigned to the quality group. They were told that their grade would be determined only by the excellence of their work. They would only need to produce one photo during the entire semester, but to get an A, it had to be a nearly perfect image. At the end of the term, Ullsman was surprised to find that all the best photos were produced by the quantity group. During the semester, these students were busy taking photos, experimenting with composition and lighting, testing out various methods in the darkroom, and learning from their mistakes. In the process of creating hundreds of photos, they honed their skills. In contrast, the quality group sat around speculating about perfection. In the end, they had little to show for their efforts other than unverified theories and one mediocre photo. It is easy to get bogged down trying to find the optimal plan for change, the fastest way to lose weight, the best program to build muscle, the perfect idea for a side hustle. We are so focused on figuring out the best approach that we never get around to taking action. Voltaire once wrote that the best is the enemy of the good. There is a distinct difference between being in motion and taking action. The two ideas sound similar, but they are not the same. When you are in motion, you are planning and strategizing and learning. Those are all good things, but they do not produce a result. Action, on the other hand, is the type of behavior that will deliver an outcome. If you outline 20 ideas for articles you want to write, that is motion. If you actually sit down and write an article, that is action. If you search for a better diet plan and read a few books on the topic, that is motion. If you actually eat a healthy meal, that is action. Sometimes motion is useful, but it will never produce an outcome by itself. It does not matter how many times you go talk to the personal trainer. That motion will never get you in shape. Only the action of working out will get the result you are looking to achieve. If motion does not lead to results, why do we do it? Sometimes we do it because we actually need to plan or learn more. But more often than not, we do it because motion allows us to feel like we are making progress without running the risk of failure. Most of us are experts at avoiding criticism. It does not feel good to fail or to be judged publicly, so we tend to avoid situations where that might happen. And that is the biggest reason why you slip into motion rather than taking action. You want to delay failure. It is easy to be in motion and convince yourself that you are still making progress. You think you are moving in the right direction because you are having conversations with potential clients or brainstorming ideas. Motion makes you feel like you are getting things done, but really, you are just preparing to get something done. When preparation becomes a form of procrastination, you need to change something. You do not want to merely be planning, you want to be practicing. If you want to master a habit, the key is to start with repetition, not perfection. You do not need to map out every feature of a new habit. You just need to practice it. This is the first takeaway of the third law. You just need to get your reps in. Every time you repeat an action, you are activating a particular neural circuit associated with that habit. This means that simply putting in your reps is one of the most critical steps you can take to encoding a new habit. It is why the students who took tons of photos improved their skills, while those who merely theorized about perfect photos did not. One group engaged in active practice, the other in passive learning. One in action, the other in motion. All habits follow a similar trajectory from effortful practice to automatic behavior, a process known as automaticity. Automaticity is the ability to perform a behavior without thinking about each step, which occurs when the non-conscious mind takes over. In the beginning, a habit requires a good deal of effort and concentration to perform. After a few repetitions, it gets easier but still requires some conscious attention. With enough practice, the habit becomes more automatic than conscious. Beyond this threshold, the habit line, the behavior can be done more or less without thinking. A new habit has been formed. This process reveals an important truth about behavior change. Habits form based on frequency, not time. One of the most common questions is, how long does it take to build a new habit? But what people really should be asking is, how many does it take to form a new habit? That is, how many repetitions are required to make a habit automatic? There is nothing magical about time passing with regard to habit formation. It does not matter if it has been 21 days or 30 days or 300 days. What matters is the rate at which you perform the behavior. You could do something twice in 30 days or 200 times. It is the frequency that makes the difference. Your current habits have been internalized over the course of hundreds, if not thousands, of repetitions. New habits require the same level of frequency. You need to string together enough successful attempts until the behavior is firmly embedded in your mind and you cross the habit line. In practice, it does not really matter how long it takes for a habit to become automatic. What matters is that you take the actions you need to take to make progress. Whether an action is fully automatic is of less importance. To build a habit, you need to practice it. And the most effective way to make practice happen is to adhere to the third law of behavior change. Make it easy. Chapter 12. The Law of Least Effort. In his Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, anthropologist Jared Diamond highlights a geographical reality that fundamentally shaped human history. He notes that the continents of North and South America are laid out on a north-south axis, meaning the landmass is tall and narrow. The same is true for Africa. In contrast, the landmass comprising Europe and Asia spans a massive east-west axis. This seemingly minor difference in shape had profound consequences for the spread of agriculture. Because locations along the same latitude generally share similar climates, sunlight durations, and seasonal changes, farmers in Europe and Asia could easily expand their operations from France all the way to China. They could domesticate a single crop and grow it across a vast stretch of the globe. Conversely, expanding agriculture in the Americas was a struggle. Traveling north to south means traversing different climate zones, from the tropical heat of the equator to the freezing temperatures of the north. A crop that thrived in one latitude would fail in another. This geographical friction slowed the spread of agriculture and, consequently, the development of civilization in those regions. This historical example illustrates a fundamental truth that applies just as powerfully to our individual lives. Human behavior is often guided by the path of least resistance. Conventional wisdom suggests that motivation is the primary driver of habit change. We tell ourselves that if we really wanted to change, we would simply force ourselves to do it. But the truth is, human beings are biologically wired to be lazy. This is not a character flaw, it is a survival strategy. Energy is a precious resource, and for most of evolutionary history, it was scarce. Therefore, the brain is programmed to conserve energy whenever possible. It is human nature to follow the law of least effort, which dictates that when deciding between two similar options, people will naturally gravitate toward the one that requires the least amount of work. We are motivated to do what is easy. Every action requires a certain amount of activation energy. The more energy required, the less likely the action is to occur. If your goal is to do 100 push-ups a day, the energy requirement is high, and your motivation will likely falter. If your goal is to do a single push-up, the energy required is negligible, and the habit is easy to sustain. Look at the behaviors that fill your daily life. Scrolling through phones, checking emails, watching television. These habits persist not because they are deeply fulfilling, but because they require almost no effort. they are remarkably convenient. In a sense, every habit is just an obstacle to getting what you really want. You do not want the habit itself, you want the outcome it delivers. You do not want to diet, you want to be fit. You do not want to meditate, you want to feel calm. The habit is just the toll you pay to reach the destination. The greater the obstacle, the more difficult the habit, the more friction stands between you and your desired state. This is why it is crucial to make your habits so easy that you will do them even when you don't feel like it. Imagine you are holding a garden hose that is bent in the middle. The water is trickling out weakly. If you want to increase the flow, you have two options. You can crank up the valve at the faucet to force more water through, or you can simply unkink the hose and let the water flow naturally. Trying to pump up your motivation to stick with a hard habit is like trying to force water through a bent hose. You can do it, but it requires tremendous effort and creates tension. Making your habits simple and easy is like removing the bend in the hose. Rather than fighting against the friction in your life, you remove it. One of the most effective ways to reduce friction is to optimize your environment. This concept, known as addition by subtraction, was mastered by Japanese electronics manufacturers in the 1970s. They relentlessly looked for every point of waste in the production process and eliminated it. They redesigned workspaces so workers didn't have to twist and turn to reach their tools. As they subtracted wasted effort, they added efficiency and reliability. We can apply this same logic to our own lives. If we remove the points of friction that sap our time and energy, we can achieve more with less effort. This leads to a strategy called priming the environment. The goal is to prepare your environment for future use so that the next action is easy. Oswald Knuckles, an IT developer, mastered this by developing a habit of resetting the room. When he finishes watching television, he places the remote back on the stand, fluffs the pillows, and folds the blanket. When he leaves his car, he throws away any trash. He resets each space to its neutral state, making it ready for the next time he uses it. By organizing his environment in advance, he ensures that the next time he wants to perform a good habit, he doesn't have to fight through a mess to get started. You can use this strategy to make good habits inevitable. If you want to eat a healthy breakfast, set out the skillet and ingredients the night before. If you want to draw more, place your pencils and sketchbook on top of your desk. Conversely, you can use the inversion of this law to break bad habits, increase the friction. If you waste too much time watching television, unplug it after each use. If that isn't enough, take the batteries out of the remote. If you check your phone too often, leave it in another room. The greater the friction, the less likely the habit. Ultimately, the central idea is to create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. Redesign your life so that the actions that matter most are also the actions that are easiest to do. Chapter 13. How to Stop Procrastinating by Using the 2-Minute Rule. Twyla Tharp is widely considered one of the most successful dancers and choreographers of the modern era. Her career has been defined by prolific creativity, but she credits much of her success to a simple daily habit. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., she puts on her workout gear, walks out of her Manhattan apartment, and hails a taxi to take her to the gym. The ritual is not the 2-hour workout that follows. The ritual is the cab. The moment she tells the driver where to go, she has completed the ritual. This simple act reduces the friction of starting and makes the rest of the routine inevitable. It is a single, repeatable action that signals to her brain that it is time to work. This story illustrates a crucial principle. Habits are the entrance ramp to a highway. They lead you down a path, and before you know it, you are speeding toward the next behavior. It is far easier to continue doing what you are already doing than to start doing something different. You sit through a bad movie because you are already in the theater. You keep eating when you are full because the plate is in front of you. You check your phone for a second and end up scrolling for 20 minutes. The habits you follow without thinking often determine the choices you make when you are thinking. Every day is filled with a handful of moments that deliver an outsized impact. These are decisive moments. They are the little choices, like a fork in the road, that set the trajectory for how you spend the next chunk of time. The moment you decide to change into your workout clothes or order takeout. The moment you choose to drive your car or ride your bike. The moment you decide to start your homework or grab the video game controller. These choices stack up, and ultimately, a few productive or unproductive decisions determine the difference between a good day and a bad one. Decisive moments set the options available to your future self. We are limited by where our habits lead us. Even when you know you should start small, it is easy to start too big. When you dream about making a change, excitement inevitably takes over, and you end up trying to do too much too soon. The most effective way to counteract this tendency is to use the 2-minute rule, which states, when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. You will find that nearly any habit can be scaled down into a 2-minute version. Read before bed each night becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat. Study for class becomes open my notes. Run 3 miles becomes tie my running shoes. The idea is to make your habits as easy as possible to start. Anyone can meditate for 1 minute, read 1 page, or put 1 item of clothing away. And as we have discussed, this is a powerful strategy because once you have started doing the right thing, it is much easier to continue doing it. A new habit should not feel like a challenge. The actions that follow can be challenging, but the first 2 minutes should be easy. What you want is a gateway habit that naturally leads you down a more productive path. You can usually figure out the gateway habits that will lead to your desired outcome by mapping out your goals on a scale from very easy to very hard. Your goal might be to run a marathon, but your gateway habit is to put on your running shoes. That is how you follow the 2-minute rule. People often think it is weird to get hyped about reading 1 page or meditating for 1 minute or making 1 sales call, but the point is not to do one thing. The point is to master the habit of showing up. The truth is, a habit must be established before it can be improved. If you cannot learn the basic skill of showing up, then you have little hope of mastering the finer details. Instead of trying to engineer a perfect habit from the start, do the easy thing on a more consistent basis. You have to standardize before you can optimize. You cannot improve a habit that does not exist. The 2-minute rule can seem like a trick to some people. You know that the real goal is to do more than just 2 minutes, so it may feel like you are trying to fool yourself. Nobody is actually aspiring to read 1 page or do 1 push-up or open their notes. And if you know it is a mental trick, why would you fall for it? If the 2-minute rule feels forced, try this. Do it for 2 minutes and then stop. Go for a run, but you must stop after 2 minutes. Start meditating, but you must stop after 2 minutes. Study Arabic, but you must stop after 2 minutes. It is not a strategy for starting, it is the whole thing. Your habit can only last 120 seconds. One reader used this strategy to lose over 100 pounds. In the beginning, he went to the gym each day, but he told himself he was not allowed to stay for more than 5 minutes. He would go to the gym, exercise for 5 minutes, and leave as soon as his time was up. After a few weeks, he looked around and thought, well, I am always coming here anyway. I might as well start staying a little longer. A few years later, the weight was gone. Strategies like this work for another reason too. They reinforce the identity you want to build. If you show up at the gym 5 days in a row, even if it is just for 2 minutes, you are casting votes for your new identity. You are not worried about getting in shape. You are focused on becoming the type of person who does not miss workouts. You are taking the smallest action that confirms the type of person you want to be. We rarely think about change this way because everyone is consumed by the end goal. But 1 push-up is better than not exercising. 1 minute of guitar practice is better than none at all. 1 minute of reading is better than never picking up a book. It is better to do less than you hoped than to do nothing at all. At some point, once you have established the habit and you are showing up each day, you can combine the 2-minute rule with a technique called habit shaping to scale your habit back up toward your ultimate goal. Start by mastering the first 2 minutes of the smallest version of the behavior. Then, advance to an intermediate step and repeat the process, focusing on just the first 2 minutes and mastering that stage before moving on to the next level. Eventually, you will end up with the habit you had originally hoped to build while still keeping your focus where it should be, on the first 2 minutes of the behavior. Whenever you are struggling to stick with a habit, you can employ the 2-minute rule. It is a simple way to make your habits easy. The more you ritualize the beginning of a process, the more likely it becomes that you can slip into the state of deep focus that is required to do great things. Make it easy to start, and the rest will follow. Chapter 14. How to make good habits. Inevitable and bad habits. Impossible. In the summer of 1830, the celebrated French author Victor Hugo found himself facing a crisis of his own making. He had promised his publisher a new book 12 months prior, but instead of writing, he had spent the year entertaining guests and pursuing other interests. Frustrated by the lack of progress, the publisher set a strict and impossible deadline. The manuscript had to be finished by February 1831, leaving Hugo less than 6 months to complete what would become The Hunchback of Notre Dame. To combat his procrastination, Hugo devised a drastic strategy. He gathered all his formal clothing and instructed his assistant to lock them away in a large chest, leaving him with nothing to wear but a large shawl. Lacking suitable attire to go outdoors or entertain visitors, he was effectively imprisoned in his study. With no other option but to write, he worked furiously through the fall and winter. The strategy succeeded, and the book was published 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Hugo's tactic illustrates a powerful principle for behavior change. Sometimes success is less about making good habits easy and more about making bad habits difficult. This is the inversion of the third law of behavior change. If you struggle to follow through on your intentions, you can utilize what psychologists call a commitment device. A commitment device is a choice you make in the present that controls your actions in the future. It is a way to lock in future behavior, bind yourself to good habits, and restrict yourself from bad ones. By locking away his clothes, Hugo created a commitment device that made the habit of socializing impossible and the habit of writing inevitable. There are many ways to create commitment devices in daily life. You can reduce the likelihood of overeating by purchasing food in individual packages rather than bulk sizes. You can voluntarily add your name to the banned list at casinos to prevent future gambling sprees. Athletes who need to make a specific weight for a competition might leave their wallets at home during the week before weigh-in so they physically cannot buy fast food. The goal is to change the task such that it requires more work to get out of the good habit than to get started on it. A modern example involves the use of technology to enforce these boundaries. A fellow habits expert, Nir Eyal, utilized an outlet timer plugged between his internet router and the power source. At 10 p.m. every night, the timer cut the power, effectively shutting down the internet. When the connection died, he and his family knew it was time to sleep. This commitment device automated the decision to go to bed, removing the need for willpower at the end of a tiring day. This concept extends beyond daily rituals into what can be called strategic one-time choices. These are single actions that automate your future habits and deliver increasing returns over time. John Henry Patterson, a business owner in the 1800s, revolutionized the retail industry by popularizing the cash register. Before its introduction, employee theft was rampant because it was easy to pocket cash without a record. By installing machines that automatically recorded transactions and locked cash away, Patterson didn't just change employee behavior, he changed the environment to make theft difficult and honesty the default. In our own lives, a single choice can lock in good behavior for years. Buying a high-quality mattress is a one-time action that improves sleep every night. Installing a water filter encourages hydration. Unsubscribing from marketing emails reduces the temptation to spend money. Setting up an automatic transfer to a savings account guarantees you save money each month without ever having to think about it. These are actions you take once that continue to serve you repeatedly. Technology is the ultimate tool for this kind of automation. It can transform actions that were once hard, annoying, and complicated into behaviors that are easy, painless, and simple. It is the most reliable way to guarantee the right behavior because it removes the human element of hesitation. When you automate as much of your life as possible, you spend less effort on the basics, freeing up mental space for the tasks that require your unique attention. During the year this book was written, I experimented with a time management strategy to curb my social media usage. I realized that the constant tug of just one more minute was preventing me from doing deep work. My solution was to have my assistant reset the passwords on all my social media accounts every Monday morning. This logged me out on every device. All week, I worked without distraction because it was literally impossible to log in. On Friday, she would send me the new passwords, and I would enjoy the platforms over the weekend until Monday morning, when the cycle repeated. The surprise was how quickly I adapted. Within the first week, I realized I didn't need to check social media nearly as often as I thought. It had simply been so easy to do that it became the default. Once the bad habit became impossible, I discovered I actually had the motivation to work on meaningful tasks. By removing the mental candy from my environment, it became much easier to consume the healthy stuff. When you automate your habits, you stop relying on willpower. You utilize commitment devices, strategic one-time decisions, and technology to create an environment of inevitability. You create a world where good habits are not just an outcome you hope for, but an outcome that is virtually guaranteed. Chapter 15. The Cardinal Rule of Behavior Change. In the late 1990s, a public health researcher named Stephen Luby traveled to Karachi, Pakistan to address a severe public health crisis. The city was dense and infrastructure was crumbling. Sewage often ran through the streets and the water supply was frequently contaminated. These unsanitary conditions were a breeding ground for illness, leading to widespread diarrhea and other preventable diseases among the local children. Luby knew that the solution was simple in theory but difficult in practice: hand washing. The problem was not a lack of knowledge. The people of the community were well aware that washing hands was important for hygiene. They knew it killed germs. They even had soap in their homes. But despite this understanding, they rarely used it. The habit hadn't stuck because the act itself wasn't enjoyable. The available soap was cheap, unpleasantly gritty, and didn't lather well. Washing hands was a chore, a necessary but tedious task with no immediate satisfaction. Luby partnered with a large consumer goods company to introduce a premium soap into the neighborhood. This new soap was a completely different experience. It foamed easily into a rich lather and smelled wonderful. Suddenly, hand washing changed from a mundane duty into a pleasing sensory event. People liked the way their hands smelled and felt afterward. Because the immediate experience was satisfying, the behavior was repeated. Within a few months, the health of the community transformed. The rate of diarrhea fell by 52%, pneumonia dropped by 48%, and skin infections decreased by 35%. By making the habit satisfying, Luby had saved lives. This story highlights a fundamental gap in our understanding of human behavior. We often assume that if we understand the long-term benefits of a habit, like better health or financial freedom, we will naturally do it. But the human brain is not wired that way. We are not driven by what is good for us in 10 years. We are driven by what feels good right now. This is the foundation of the fourth law of behavior change: make it satisfying. To understand why we prioritize the present over the future, we have to look at our evolutionary history. For the vast majority of human existence, our ancestors lived in an immediate return environment. Life was focused on the here and now. If you were hungry, you hunted or foraged and ate immediately. If a storm approached, you found shelter immediately. Decisions were made based on their instant impact on survival. There was no concept of saving for retirement or sticking to a diet for a beach vacation months away. In contrast, modern society is a delayed return environment. We show up at work today, but the paycheck doesn't arrive for 2 weeks. We exercise now to prevent heart disease decades down the road. We study tonight to get a degree in 4 years. The problem is that while our environment has changed, our brains have not. We are walking around with the same hardware as our Paleolithic ancestors. Our neural architecture is still optimized for immediate gratification. This mismatch creates a phenomenon that behavioral economists call time inconsistency. Essentially, the way your brain evaluates rewards is inconsistent across time. You value the present more than the future. A reward that is certain right now is worth more than a reward that is merely possible later. This is why you might have a strong intention to lose weight, a future reward, but still eat the dessert, an immediate reward. The logical part of your brain knows the diet is better, but the emotional part of your brain wants the sugar. Usually, the immediate reward wins. This leads to the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. If a behavior leads to a feeling of satisfaction, your brain learns to do it again. But if an experience is painful or unsatisfying, your brain learns to avoid it. The vital lesson here is that you learn what to do based on the immediate outcome, not the ultimate outcome. Bad habits are often difficult to break because the immediate outcome is usually positive. Smoking provides instant stress relief, good, even though it kills you in the long run, bad. Overeating provides instant pleasure, good, even though it leads to obesity later, bad. The cost of your good habits is in the present. The cost of your bad habits is in the future. To get a habit to stick, you need to feel successful, even if it's just in a small way. The feeling of success is a signal that your habit paid off and that the work was worth the effort. In a perfect world, the reward for a good habit would be the habit itself. But in the real world, good habits tend to feel like a sacrifice. You need to give yourself an immediate reason to stay on track while you wait for the delayed rewards to accumulate. One effective strategy is to use reinforcement. Reinforcement ties your habit to an immediate reward, which makes the behavior satisfying when you finish it. For example, a couple who wanted to stop eating out and start cooking more at home opened a savings account labeled Trip to Europe. Every time they skipped a restaurant meal and cooked at home, they transferred $50 into the account. The immediate satisfaction of seeing the balance grow provided the short-term reward they needed to keep cooking. while the long-term reward of the vacation took care of itself. It is important to select short-term rewards that reinforce your identity rather than conflict with it. If your goal is to lose weight, rewarding a workout with a bowl of ice cream is counterproductive because it casts a vote for a conflicting identity. Instead, reward yourself with a massage or a new workout outfit. These rewards make you feel good and align with the identity of a healthy person. Eventually, intrinsic motivation takes over. Once a habit is established, you do it because it is who you are, and the activity itself becomes the reward. But you can't rely on that in the beginning. In the early stages of a new habit, you need an external reason to keep going. You need to engineer a way to feel successful immediately. The first 3 laws of behavior change: make it obvious, make it attractive, and make it easy, increase the odds that a behavior will be performed this time. The 4th law, make it satisfying, increases the odds that a behavior will be repeated next time. Chapter 16. How to stick with good habits every day. In 1993, a young stockbroker named Trent Deersmid took a job at a bank in a small suburb of Vancouver. Despite his rookie status and the unassuming location, he made immediate and startling progress thanks to a simple daily ritual. On his desk sat 2 jars. One was filled with 120 paper clips, while the other was completely empty. Every morning, he would start with the full jar and dial the phone for a sales call. As soon as he hung up, he would move a single paper clip to the empty jar. He would not stop until he had moved every single clip to the other side. Within 18 months, he was bringing in $5 million for the firm. By his mid-20s, he was earning a 6-figure income. This technique, often referred to as the paperclip strategy, is a prime example of how visual markers can facilitate habit formation. Making progress is satisfying, and visual measures provide clear evidence of your effort. They reinforce your behavior and add a little bit of immediate satisfaction to any activity. Visual cues come in many forms, such as food journals, workout logs, loyalty punch cards, or even the page numbers in a book. But perhaps the best way to measure your progress is with a habit tracker. Habit tracking is a simple method to measure whether you did a habit. The most basic format is to get a calendar and cross off each day you stick to your routine. Over time, the calendar becomes a record of your habit streak. Jerry Seinfeld reportedly used a similar technique to maintain his writing consistency. His goal was simply to not break the chain of daily X's on his calendar. This simple act leverages multiple laws of behavior change. It makes the habit obvious by creating a visual cue that reminds you to act. It makes the habit attractive by signaling progress and motivating you to keep the streak alive. And it makes the habit satisfying by providing a sense of accomplishment each time you mark an X. The most effective form of motivation is progress. When we get a signal that we are moving forward, we become more motivated to continue down that path. In this way, habit tracking can have an addictive effect on motivation. Each small win feeds your desire. This can be particularly powerful on a bad day. When you are feeling down, it is easy to forget all the progress you have already made. Habit tracking provides visual proof of your hard work, a subtle reminder of how far you have come. Furthermore, the empty square you see each morning can motivate you to get started because you don't want to break your progress. Despite these benefits, tracking is not for everyone, nor is it necessary for every habit. It can feel like a burden to track every aspect of your life because it forces you into 2 habits: the habit you are trying to build and the habit of tracking it. Most people can only sustain a few active trackers at any given time. A better approach is to manually track only your most important habits or to automate the process using technology. Your credit card statement automatically tracks how often you eat out. Your fitness wearable tracks your steps and sleep. Once you have the data, you can review it periodically rather than obsessing over it daily. Even with the best intentions, habit streaks eventually end. Life interrupts. You get sick, you travel for work, or your family needs you. When this happens, it is crucial to have a plan for recovery. The rule to follow is simple: never miss twice. If you miss one day, try to get back on track as quickly as possible. Missing one workout happens, but you should not miss 2 in a row. Maybe you eat an entire pizza, but follow it up with a healthy meal. You can't be perfect, but you can avoid a second lapse. The first mistake is never the one that ruins you. It is the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. This concept distinguishes professionals from amateurs. Professionals stick to the schedule. Amateurs let life get in the way. Professionals know what is important to them and work toward it with purpose. Amateurs get pulled off course by the urgencies of life. Even on your bad days, it is important to show up. Lost days hurt you more than successful days help you. If you start with $100, then a 50% gain will take you to $150. But you only need a 33% loss to take you back to $100. In other words, avoiding a 33% loss is just as valuable as achieving a 50% gain. It is also important to remember that tracking is just a tool, not the goal itself. We often get so focused on the measurement that we forget the purpose behind it. This pitfall is known as Goodhart's law, which states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Measurement is only useful when it guides you and adds context to a larger picture, not when it consumes you. If you focus too much on the number on the scale, you might starve yourself rather than focusing on being healthy. If you focus too much on reading a specific number of books, you might choose short books rather than meaningful ones. The dark side of tracking is that we can become driven by the number rather than the purpose behind it. We optimize for what we measure. When we choose the wrong measurement, we get the wrong behavior. Just because you can measure something doesn't mean it's the most important thing. And just because you can't measure something doesn't mean it's not important. You can measure your weight, but it's hard to measure your energy level. You can measure the number of sales calls you make, but it's hard to measure the quality of the conversation. Don't let the numbers define your success. Use them as feedback to help you stay on the path. Chapter 17. How an accountability partner can change everything. After serving as a pilot in the Second World War, Roger Fisher dedicated his career to the study of conflict resolution and negotiation. During the height of the Cold War, as the threat of nuclear annihilation loomed over the global consciousness, he turned his attention to a peculiar problem regarding the American presidency. The president had singular authority to launch nuclear codes that could decimate millions, yet he would never witness the immediate carnage of that decision. He would remain safely removed in a bunker or a war room thousands of miles from the devastation. Fisher proposed a visceral solution to bridge this gap between action and consequence. He suggested that the nuclear launch codes be placed inside a small capsule and implanted next to the heart of a volunteer. This volunteer would carry a heavy butcher knife and accompany the president at all times. If the commander-in-chief ever decided to launch a nuclear strike, he would first have to kill the volunteer with his own hands to retrieve the code. He would have to look a human being in the eye, end a life, and see blood on the White House carpet before he could kill millions. When Fisher presented this idea to the Pentagon, they were horrified, arguing that the president might never push the button if faced with such immediate brutality. That, Fisher argued, was exactly the point. This extreme proposal illustrates the inversion of the fourth law of behavior change: make it immediately unsatisfying. Just as we are driven to repeat behaviors that offer immediate satisfaction, we are biologically wired to avoid experiences that inflict immediate pain. Pain is a potent teacher. When the consequences of a mistake are instant and severe, we learn quickly. If a child touches a hot stove, they learn never to do it again. If a surgeon cuts the wrong vessel, the immediate bleeding forces a rapid correction in technique. However, if the consequences are delayed or painless, the behavior is easily ignored. Most bad habits persist because they serve us in the moment, while the penalties are deferred until the distant future. We smoke because it relaxes us now, ignoring the cancer that may arrive decades later. We overspend because it feels good to buy, ignoring the debt that accumulates slowly. To eliminate unhealthy behaviors, we must increase the speed of the punishment. There cannot be a gap between the action and the consequence. As soon as a behavior incurs an immediate cost, the likelihood of repetition drops. We pay bills on time to avoid late fees. We drive the speed limit to avoid tickets. We are willing to jump through hoops to avoid a little bit of immediate pain. A powerful tool to introduce this kind of immediate cost is the habit contract. This strategy borrows from the concept of a social contract, where a group agrees to abide by certain rules for mutual benefit, enforced by laws and regulations. When seatbelt laws were introduced in New York in the 1980s, usage was low. But as legislation spread and enforcement began, behavior shifted dramatically across the nation. We can apply this same principle on an individual level. A habit contract is a verbal or written agreement in which you state your commitment to a particular habit and the specific penalty that will occur if you fail to follow through. Crucially, this contract requires an accountability partner to enforce the terms. Brian Harris, an entrepreneur from Nashville, utilized this strategy effectively when he wanted to lose weight. He drafted a formal document detailing his objectives, including specific macronutrient targets and a workout schedule. He didn't just write down his goals, he established severe and immediate penalties for failure. If he missed his food tracking targets, he had to pay his trainer. If he failed to weigh himself, he owed money to his wife. Perhaps most agonizingly, if he skipped his sprints, he committed to wearing the hat of his favorite sports team's bitter rival for the rest of the quarter. He signed the contract, along with his wife and trainer. The formality of the contract signaled that this was not a casual wish, but a serious commitment. The potential punishments made laziness painful in the immediate moment. He couldn't simply skip a workout and feel fine. He would have to face the immediate social and financial embarrassment of the penalty. The strategy worked because it aligned his daily actions with his long-term goals by making the alternative unbearable. Even without a formal contract, simply having an accountability partner can be a transformative force. We care deeply about what others think of us. We want to be seen as trustworthy, reliable, and intelligent. We groom ourselves, dress well, and curate our behavior because we desire the approval of our peers. When we know someone is watching, we perform better. An accountability partner leverages this desire for social approval. If you commit to writing a song every day and share it with a friend, the cost of skipping a day becomes the immediate pain of letting someone down or looking lazy. In the digital age, this can even be automated. Some entrepreneurs have utilized tools to automatically publish embarrassing tweets or donate money to causes they despise if they fail to wake up on time or complete a task. The mechanism remains the same. Create an immediate, unavoidable cost for inaction. By making your bad habits public and painful, you make them impossible to sustain. You no longer have to rely solely on internal willpower because the environment you have created applies the necessary pressure to keep you on track. Chapter 18. The Truth About Talent, When Genes Matter and When They Don't. At the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, two athletes made history in ways that highlight the undeniable influence of biology on success. Michael Phelps, the American swimmer, dominated the pool, winning 6 gold medals. Hicham El Guerrouj, the Moroccan runner, ruled the track, taking gold in the 1,500 meters and 5,000 meters. Both men are widely considered among the greatest athletes to ever live, yet they differ dramatically in physical stature. Phelps stands 6 feet 4 inches tall, while El Guerrouj is just 5 feet 9 inches. Despite this 7-inch difference in height, the two men share an identical inseam length. This physical anomaly reveals the specific advantages required for their respective sports. Phelps possesses a disproportionately long torso and relatively short legs, a build that essentially turns his body into a long, sleek paddleboat perfect for gliding through water. Conversely, El Guerrouj has incredibly long legs and a short upper body, a structure that provides the mechanical efficiency needed for distance running. If these two legends were to trade places, the results would be disastrous. Phelps would be too heavy and unaerodynamic for elite distance running, while El Guerrouj would lack the pulling power required for Olympic swimming. Even with elite work ethic, neither could overcome the biological constraints that make them perfect for one domain and average for another. This reality challenges the popular narrative that anyone can be anything they want to be. We are often told that hard work is the only variable that matters, but the truth is that genes play a significant role in determining where our efforts will yield the highest returns. Genes do not determine your destiny, they determine your areas of opportunity. They do not decide whether you will become a master, but they do influence which field you should choose to master. Deeply ingrained biological traits predispose us to excel in certain environments and struggle in others. The key to success is not just working harder, but working on the right things. To maximize your odds of success, you must choose the right field of competition. This is the secret to maximizing your potential. It is easier to maintain a habit if you are naturally good at it. When you pick a game where the odds are stacked in your favor, you look like a genius. When you pick a game where the odds are stacked against you, you look like a failure. The most common advice is to play to your strengths, but the more difficult question is how to identify what those strengths are. The best approach to finding your ideal game is to balance the strategies of exploration and exploitation. In the beginning, you should cast a wide net. Explore various interests, try different sports, read books on diverse topics, and experiment with multiple career paths. This is the exploration phase. Once you find something that clicks, something that comes naturally to you and yields better results than average, you shift to exploitation. You double down on that area, focusing your energy on mastering the specific skills required. As you gain expertise, you continue to exploit your advantage, but you should occasionally cycle back to exploration to ensure you don't become stagnant. To determine where your natural strengths lie, pay attention to how you feel while engaged in an activity. Ask yourself, what feels like fun to me but looks like work to others? The mark of a natural fit is that you can handle the boredom and pain of the task better than most people. When you lose track of time and enter a state of flow, it is a strong signal that you are engaged in a task that aligns with your personality and abilities. Another indicator is whether you get greater returns than the average person. If you and a friend practice the same skill for the same amount of time, but you improve twice as fast, you have likely found a genetic advantage. If you cannot find a game where the odds are in your favor, create one. Scott Adams, the creator of the comic strip Dilbert, serves as a prime example. Adams admitted he was not the funniest person in the room, nor was he the best artist. However, he was a better artist than most comedians and funnier than most artists. By combining these two modest skills with his background in business, he created a unique niche that allowed him to become the most successful syndicated cartoonist of his era. When you can't win by being better, you can win by being different. By combining skills, you reduce the level of competition and make your genetic mix an asset rather than a liability. It is crucial to understand that accepting the role of genes is not an excuse for laziness. On the contrary, it clarifies exactly where you should direct your hard work. The most successful people are those who work hard on the things that come easy to them. They align their ambition with their ability. Genes provide the baseline, but habits determine the outcome. A person with great genetics who doesn't work hard will eventually be surpassed by someone with average genetics who builds exceptional habits. However, at the absolute peak of performance, where everyone works hard and everyone is disciplined, genetics become the deciding factor. In the end, biology matters. Boiling water will soften a potato but harden an egg. You can't control whether you are a potato or an egg, but you can decide whether to jump into boiling water or a frying pan. You can choose the environment where your natural tendencies become a strength rather than a weakness. The goal is not to fight against your nature, but to align your habits with it. When you play a game that suits your strengths, progress is faster, motivation is higher, and success feels natural. Chapter 19. The Goldilocks Rule: How to Stay Motivated in Life and Work. In 1955, Disneyland had just opened in Anaheim, California, when a 10-year-old boy walked up to the front gate and asked for a job. Labor laws were loose at the time, and the boy managed to secure a position selling guidebooks for 50 cents apiece. Over the next 30 years, he would transition from selling guidebooks to performing magic tricks at the magic shop, to trying his hand at stand-up comedy in small clubs around Los Angeles. He spent a decade experimenting, tweaking his act, and learning how to hold an audience. By the mid-1970s, Steve Martin was the biggest stand-up comedian in the world. Martin's rise to fame is a perfect illustration of what it takes to stay motivated over the long haul. In his autobiography, Born Standing Up, he dismantles the myth that his success was due to some innate magical talent. Instead, he describes a process of gradual improvement. He didn't start by selling out stadiums. He started by performing for empty rooms and hecklers. He slowly worked his way up to better clubs, then television appearances, and finally, national tours. His journey highlights a critical rule of human motivation. We are most engaged when we are working on tasks that are right on the edge of our current abilities. This concept is known as the Goldilocks Rule. It states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are not too hard, not too easy, but just right. If you try to play a serious tennis match against a 4-year-old, you will quickly become bored. The challenge is too low. Conversely, if you try to play against a professional like Roger Federer or Serena Williams, you will quickly become demotivated. The challenge is too high. But if you play against someone who is your equal, the game becomes engaging. You win some points, you lose some points. You have a chance to win, but only if you really try. Your focus narrows, distractions fade away, and you find yourself fully immersed in the task. The sweet spot of the Goldilocks Rule is where the state of flow occurs. Flow is the mental state of being completely absorbed in an activity where the rest of the world seems to disappear. Researchers have found that to reach this state, you need to be working on a challenge that is roughly 4% beyond your current ability. It needs to be just manageable enough to be possible, but difficult enough to require your full attention. This balance is crucial for maintaining motivation over the long term. When you are starting a new habit, it is important to keep the behavior as easy as possible so you can stick with it even when conditions aren't perfect. However, once a habit has been established, it is important to advance in small ways. If you continue to do the exact same thing day after day, you will eventually become bored. This is one of the paradoxes of behavior change. We need habits to be easy to start, but we need them to be challenging to sustain. To maintain interest, you must search for challenges that push you slightly beyond your comfort zone. The greatest threat to success is not failure, but boredom. We get bored with habits because they stop delighting us. The outcome becomes expected, and as our habits become ordinary, we start derailing our progress to seek novelty. Perhaps this is why we get caught up in a never-ending cycle of jumping from one workout program to the next, or one diet to another, or one business idea to the next. As soon as we experience the slightest dip in motivation, we begin looking for a new strategy, even if the old one was still working. The Machiavellian villain in the 1960s television series Batman once said, "The only crime is being boring." In the context of self-improvement, this is often true. Boredom is the enemy of consistency. It is the reason why many people who are genuinely talented and hardworking never reach their full potential. They can't handle the daily grind of practicing the same things over and over again. Professionals and amateurs differ in how they handle this boredom. Amateurs make the mistake of assuming that if they feel bored, something is wrong. They believe that successful people have some bottomless reserve of passion that allows them to work without ever feeling the drag of repetition. But the truth is that everyone gets bored. The difference is that the people who stick with it, the top athletes, the successful writers, the brilliant musicians, find a way to show up despite the feelings of boredom. They don't let their emotions dictate their actions. Mastery requires practice. But the more you practice something, the more boring and routine it becomes. Once the beginner gains are made and we learn what to expect, our interest starts to fade. Sometimes it happens even faster than that. We hit the gym for a few days in a row and feel great, but then we miss a day and the initial excitement wears off. Suddenly, going to the gym feels like a chore rather than an adventure. This is the moment when you have to decide whether you are a professional or an amateur. If you only do the work when it's convenient or exciting, then you'll never be consistent enough to achieve remarkable results. Anyone can work hard when they feel motivated. It's the ability to keep going when the work isn't exciting that makes the difference. Success is not a result of passion. It is a result of perseverance. It is the ability to fall in love with boredom. Motivation comes and goes. If you want to excel, you cannot rely on it. You have to learn how to keep going when the novelty wears off. Stepping up when it's annoying or painful or draining to do so is what makes the difference between a professional and an amateur. There have been plenty of sets I haven't wanted to finish, plenty of articles I haven't wanted to write, and plenty of days I haven't wanted to show up. But I have never regretted doing the work once it was done. The only way to become excellent is to be endlessly fascinated by doing the same thing over and over. You have to fall in love with boredom. Chapter 20. The downside of creating good habits. Habits are the backbone of any pursuit of excellence. In chess, it is only after the basic movements of the pieces have become automatic that a player can focus on the next level of the game. Each chunk of information that is memorized opens up the mental space for more effortful thinking. This is true for any endeavor. When you know the simple movements so well that you can perform them without thinking, you are free to pay attention to more advanced details. In this way, habits create the foundation for mastery. However, the benefits of habits come at a cost. At first, each repetition develops fluency, speed, and skill. But then, as a habit becomes automatic, you become less sensitive to feedback. You fall into mindless repetition. It becomes easier to let mistakes slide. When you can do it good enough on autopilot, you stop thinking about how to do it better. The upside of habits is that we can do things without thinking. The downside of habits is that you get used to doing things a certain way and stop paying attention to little errors. You assume you're getting better because you're gaining experience. In reality, you are merely reinforcing your current habits, not improving them. In fact, some research has shown that once a skill has been mastered, there is usually a slight decline in performance over time. Usually, this minor dip in performance is no cause for worry. You don't need a system to continuously improve how well you brush your teeth or tie your shoes or make your morning cup of tea. With habits like these, good enough is usually good enough. The less energy you spend on trivial choices, the more you can spend it on what really matters. However, when you want to maximize your potential and achieve elite levels of performance, you need a more nuanced approach. You can't repeat the same things blindly and expect to become exceptional. Habits are necessary, but not sufficient for mastery. What you need is a combination of automatic habits and deliberate practice. Habits plus deliberate practice equals mastery. To become great, certain skills do need to become automatic. Basketball players need to be able to dribble without thinking before they can move on to mastering layups with their non-dominant hand. Surgeons need to repeat the first incision so many times that they could do it with their eyes closed so that they can focus on the hundreds of variables that arise during surgery. But after one habit has been mastered, you have to return to the effortful part of the work and begin building the next habit. Mastery is the process of narrowing your focus to a tiny element of success, repeating it until you have internalized the skill, and then using this new habit as the foundation to advance to the next frontier of your development. Old tasks become easier the second time around, but it doesn't get easier overall because now you're pouring your energy into the next challenge. Each habit unlocks the next level of performance. It's an endless cycle. Although habits are powerful, what you need is a way to remain conscious of your performance over time, so you can continue to refine and improve. It is precisely at the moment when you begin to feel like you have mastered a skill, right when things are starting to feel automatic and you are becoming comfortable, that you must avoid slipping into the trap of complacency. The solution is to establish a system for reflection and review. In 1986, the Los Angeles Lakers had one of the most talented basketball teams ever assembled, but they are rarely remembered for that. Instead, they are remembered for stumbling in the playoffs and losing the Western Conference Finals. The best team in the history of basketball didn't even play for the NBA championship. After that blow, head coach Pat Riley unveiled a new plan to reclaim their title. He created a system called the Career Best Effort Program, or CBE. The premise was simple. Players were asked to improve their output by at least 1% over the course of the season. Riley knew that if every player improved their performance by just a small margin, the collective effect would be massive. He asked them to track their statistics carefully and compare them to their historical averages. If a player had a CB of 12%, it meant they had outperformed their previous best by that margin. The result? The Lakers rolled through the playoffs the following year and won the NBA championship. Reflection and review enables the long-term improvement of all habits because it makes you aware of your mistakes and helps you consider possible paths for improvement. Without reflection, we can make excuses, create rationalizations, and lie to ourselves. We have no process for determining whether we are performing better or worse compared to yesterday. Executives and investors keep decision journals to record the major decisions they make each week, why they made them, and what they expect the outcome to be. They review their choices at the end of each month or year to see where they were correct and where they went wrong. I use two primary modes of reflection and review. Each December, I perform an annual review in which I reflect on the previous year. I tally my habits for the year by counting up how many articles I published, how many workouts I put in, how many new places I visited, and more. Then I reflect on my progress, or lack thereof, by answering 3 questions. 1. What went well this year? 2. What didn't go so well this year? 3. What did I learn? 6 months later, when summer rolls around, I conduct an integrity report. Like everyone else, I make a lot of mistakes. My integrity report helps me realize where I went wrong and motivates me to get back on course. I answer 3 questions. 1. What are the core values that drive my life and work? 2. How am I living and working with integrity right now? 3. How can I set a higher standard in the future? These 2 reports provide an annual check-in that prevents me from sliding into a rut. They provide me with a time to revisit my core values and consider whether I have been living in accordance with them. They serve as a reminder to revisit my identity and how I can work to become the type of person I wish to be. This brings us to the final downside of habits. The more we cling to an identity, the harder it becomes to grow beyond it. As we discussed earlier, one of the best ways to build a habit is to make it part of your identity. You say, I am a runner, or I am a writer, or I am a vegan. But this can also be a trap. When you wrap your identity around a specific goal or role, you set yourself up for an identity crisis when things change. If you are a vegan and then develop a health condition that forces you to change your diet, you have an identity crisis. If you are a CEO and you sell your company, you have an identity crisis. If you are an athlete and you suffer a career-ending injury, you have an identity crisis. When you cling too tightly to one identity, you become brittle. Lose that one thing, and you lose yourself. The solution is to avoid making any single aspect of your identity an overwhelming portion of who you are. In the words of investor Paul Graham, keep your identity small. The more you let a single belief define you, the less capable you are of adapting when life challenges you. If you tie everything up in being the point guard or the partner at the firm or whatever else, then the loss of that facet of your life will wreck you. If you're a vegan and then you have to start eating meat for health reasons, you'll have an identity crisis. To mitigate this, you need to redefine your identity in a way that allows you to keep the important aspects of who you are while remaining flexible. Instead of, I'm an athlete, become, I'm the type of person who is mentally tough and loves a physical challenge. Instead of, I'm a great soldier, become, I'm the type of person who is disciplined, reliable, and great at working with a team. Instead of, I'm the CEO, become, I'm the type of person who builds and creates things. Effectively, you are translating your specific role into a transferable trait. When you choose an identity that is flexible rather than brittle, you can adapt to the changing circumstances of life. Habits deliver numerous benefits, but the downside is that they can lock us into our previous patterns of thinking and acting even when the world is shifting around us. Everything is impermanent, life is constantly changing, so you need to periodically check in to see if your old habits and beliefs are still serving you. A lack of self-awareness is poison. Reflection and review is the antidote.